Present today, we have Representative Laban and Vice Chair Ortiz, Co-Chair Merrick, Representative Josephson, Representative Wool, Representative Johnson, myself, Co-Chair Foster. I don't believe there's anybody online legislator-wise. So with that...
Hear me? Your line is unmuted. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Oh, Representative Carpenter. Okay, we've got Representative Carpenter there. And is anybody else online? And I don't hear anybody else online. So at this meeting, I'd like to present and adopt the committee substitutes for House Bill 281, the operating budget, as well as House Bill 282, the mental health budget. And after the changes are explained, we'll be taking public testimony today. And for members and the public's information, this committee substitute was written based on the fall 2021 revenue forecast, and it is not my intent to move the budget from committee until after we get the spring 2022 forecast, which we anticipate will be March 15. And one benefit of pushing things back is it will give members more time to understand and consider the changes that are being made between the governor's budget and this committee substitutes. And so, and members, if there's any need for clarification on anything, feel free to reach out to my office and contact my staff with any questions. So with that, let's see here. So just to put the committee substitutes before the committee for discussion, I would entertain a motion. Representative Merrick.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I move that the House Finance Committee adopt committee substitute for House Bill 281, Work Draft 32-GH2686N, dated 3/3/22 as our working document.
Okay, and I'll object for the purposes of an explanation. And I'll call my staff, Brody Anderson, up to explain the changes in version N. So, Mr. Anderson, if you can put yourself on the record.
Thank you, Co-Chair Foster. For the record, Brody Anderson, staff to Representative Neil Foster. Before the committee today is committee substitute for House Bill 281, version N. Before we go into the details of the bill, I'd like to orientate the members to the different handouts that are in front of the committee. You should have the actual bill, HB 281 committee substitute version N in front of you. House Bill 282, the mental health bill version I, and then a set of about 6 documents. And I will go ahead and give the title names and then sort of orientate the members to what these reports do. I might not reference a lot of these reports, but they're available for the members. Document number 1 is the UGF agency summary. This is a roll-up of all of the agency's spending just in UGF. The top portion are your agency sections. Then you have your statewide sections at the bottom of the page. And then on page 2, that will reflect the permanent fund and transfers. Going across from left to right is the different comparisons or years. You have your management plan in column 1, and these are just sequentially ordered. Column 1 is your management plan. Number 2 is your adjusted base. Number 3 is your governor amended budget. Column 4 is your House baseline committee substitute that we rolled out on January 27th. Then you have your final column 5 is your House committee substitute known as CS1, which is before you today. The final 3 columns are comparisons, which is basically management plan to the House CS1, then adjusted base to CS1, and then governor amend to CS1. So that's your orientation strictly on the UGF spend. Document number 2 is your all fund agency summary. And this is the same sort of orientation with your agency, statewide, permanent fund, and transfers going down the page onto page 2. And then also same orientation going from column 1 through 5 and your comparisons. The only difference is all funds. If you'll notice on page 2, you will see that all funds that the state spends is reflected on this report. So you have your UGF compared to your DGF, compared to your state funds or other state funds, and then your federal spend. Document number 3 is CS1's operating supplemental items. We have added supplemental items to this budget, and this will reflect those added items, which I will get through during the walkthrough. Number 4 is the transaction compare. It's a pretty hardy packet. It is broken up by departments, walking your way through the entire thing. This is basically a detailed breakdown of what is included in the CS1. So you'll see all the different changes that have happened, whether or not that was in the committee, the subcommittee process, and also changes to the language sections throughout the bill, but they will be reflected by departments. Number 5, revenue replacement, is your document showing where ARPA revenue replacement has been included in the various departments, and I will walk through this document later on in the presentation. And then finally, document number 6 is an updated list on swept funds. There will be a portion where we discuss swept funds and having them returned to the CS, and this will be a document that I will reference when we get to that portion of the budget. Mr. Chairman, those are the documents in front. Like I said, I might not reference them too much, but the biggest ones that we will handle right now is documents number 1, UGF agency summary, and document number 2, agency summary, all funds agency summaries. For fiscal year 23, the House Finance Subcommittee substitute reflects a total of $9,418,028.5 thousand in agency operations. And that is, to find it on your document number 2, that would be the number reflected in column 5, about halfway down the bottom of the page at agency, at the total, there in column 5. And agency operations is your more day-to-day state government operations for the budget. For statewide items, it's $1,568,014.4 thousand in statewide items, which is your debt service, your retirement payments, your special appropriations, and fund capitalizations. That is also reflected on document number 2, all funds, under the total statewide, almost at the bottom of your page. These funds total, and if you turn to your back page, and sticking with document number 2, these funds equal $3,073,107.4 thousand of federal funds. That would be in your, that would be in your column 5 under federal receipts. Under designated general funds, we're spending $871,369.2 thousand in DGF or designated general funds. Then in other funds, we're spending $1,662,115.7 thousand in other funds, which is the authorization of corporate receipts like ADA, HFC, aerospace, interagency receipts like IA, and also airport receipts and a few others. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, UGF spend is $6,294,392,400 of general funds. Compared to adjusted base, the unrestricted general fund spend reflects a $1,270,663,600 above adjusted base, which is an increase of 25.3% above adjusted base. But the largest increase to that addition is the addition of a permanent fund and the energy relief check.
On that last point.
Yeah, and I'm hoping we've got to get to public testimony, but on that last point.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 1.27 billion, you said that's the PFD, and is that pretty much how much of that is the additional PFD or energy relief check or whatever?
Through the chair, Representative, if I can get back to you and reflect that in the reports, I can get back and show that. It will be found mostly on the document number 1, UGF agency summary. Continuing on, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to walk the committee through the major changes on the CS, changes from the CS that was dated January 27th. First off, the major changes from the CS is that this substitute includes all of the changes from the subcommittee closeouts. However, after subcommittees closed out, there were a few things that had to change in the numbers section, so I'll address them now. And I'll be walking through the actual bill before you, and I'll be referencing page and line numbers. The first one is on page 8, lines 8 through 10 of the actual bill. Through the chair.
Correctional complex, Anchorage. Yeah.
That's correct. Through the chair, that's correct. This carry forward language was moved from the language section to numbers, as it is more appropriately placed in the numbers section. The carry forward language is intended to fully utilize federal funds in the Anchorage Correctional Complex and even out costs across the fiscal years. The department has expressed no concern with this change. Next is page 14, lines 23 through 28.
Brief at ease.
Brief at ease. House Finance back on record. Mr. Anderson.
Once again, for the Department of Family and Community Services, page 14, lines 23 through 28. In the Office of Children's Services, funding and intent language associated with the Tribal Child Welfare Compact was transferred from the frontline social workers allocation to its own allocation to ensure better tracking and reporting for the $5 million appropriated for the compact. This was a subcommittee recommendation. Department of Labor, page 23, line 31. This change moves open-ended federal authority for unemployment insurance benefits and associated administrative costs from the language section to the numbers section as a $10 million one-time increment. The department did not express concern with the $10 million cap, which should be sufficient for this year. Next, university, page 38, line 33. The subcommittee added $3.75 million of UGF to the Anchorage campus allocation for the purpose of expanding healthcare worker training program. The CS swapped that UGF funds to SLRF. This was the original request and intention by both the Board of Regents and the Governor. These are the only differences to the subcommittee actions in the number section, excluding the revenue replacement, which I will get to at later on in the presentation. So if I could have the committee jump quite a few pages to page 59. Page 59, lines 1 through 5, section 7. This is the supplemental section that refers to your document number 3, operating supplemental. Once again, section 7, page 59, lines 1 through 5. This is the $48.5 million for last year's remaining portion of school bond debt. This amount makes the state payment 100% of the obligation required for last year's payment. There is a July 1st, 2021 retroactivity date reflected in this provision. Next, page 59, page 59, lines 11 through 14, which is subsection B. This is the $7.1 million for last year's remaining payment to eligible recipients for a community assistance program. There is also a July 1st, 2021 retroactivity date here as well, and all retroactivity dates are reflected in section 21. Section 9, supplemental fund on page 59, lines 15 and 16. This is the $31.8 million to repopulate the community assistant fund up to the full $90 million. This is a supplemental item in FY22, so the payments can be made full in FY23. Sticking on page 59, lines 17 through 20, subsection B. $17.1 million is appropriated to the Regional Education Attendance Area, or the REAA fund. This is the amount to make the FY22 amount whole as well. Page 59, lines 21 through 22, subsection C. This is $60 million is appropriated to pay for the oil and gas tax credits. This is the amount to make the full payments for the tax credits in FY22. Last year, the payments were short by $60 million.
Representative LeBon?
What's the funding source for that 60 million? Is it UGF?
Through the chair, Representative, that is correct.
Thank you.
Page 59, lines 20, all of these sections have a July 1st, 2021 retroactivity date as well. Moving on to page 59, lines 23 through page 60, line 8. These are subsections A and B for fund transfers. This is the authorization to refill all of the accounts that were swept into the CBR when the CBR sweep vote failed. And this includes the higher education fund. And if I can have members refer to document number 6, updated list of the swept funds. The supplemental fund transfer will equal $439,493,188.82. This is an exact amount provided by the Alaska Comprehensive Financial Report. You will see that all of these funds that have numbers are this subsection or this section under fund transfers will repopulate UGF into all of these accounts. The largest being the higher education fund investment, which is the $94 million you see there.
Mr. Anderson, can you repeat that number? Thank you.
Sorry. Yes, the higher education investment fund will be repopulated with $394.5 million. I've rounded.
Representative Josephson?
So, through the chair, at Section 10, page 59, rather than reflecting each number, you're just referring by reference to swept items, correct?
That is correct, through the chair, Representative.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
Is there a CBR vote called for in this bill?
Through the chair, Representative, no, there is no CBR vote required or in place this year.
Representative Wool?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this, I know we're waiting for the spring forecast, and I know these swept funds, is this basically, these numbers are in here with the idea that the spring forecast will come in and be reconciled with this? In other words, is this budget complete without the spring forecast?
Through the chair, Representative, this is a supplemental request, so this is using FY22 surplus. So they will be, the funds will be provided.
And maybe I feel like we're getting into kind of the big picture stuff here versus taking these, I mean, once we get to the end, we can get to the bigger questions, but Representative Josephson, did you have something specific on the swept funds?
Yes, just super fast through the chair, Mr. Anderson. For example, just taking randomly, the Workers' Comp Benefit Fund, 3.1 million. Do we know whether 3.1 million will be consumed in FY23, or will there invariably be more swept again into the CBR?
Mr. Anderson?
Through the chair, Representative, I'll have to get back to you on that question in regards to the CBR sweep for FY23. So.
Thank you.
Representative LeBon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry to ask a question on the swept funds, but just to make sure I'm following. Mr. Brody, are these dollars now in the CBR?
Through the chair, Representative, that is correct. Those funds that were once populated that got swept at the end of FY21 were gone. So this would be repopulating these with new UGF.
So we're going to leave, if I may, Mr. Chairman, we're going to leave the swept funds in the CBR and repopulate with UGF?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Moving on to page 60, lines 9 through 11. This is the supplemental statutory budget reserve fund. This section takes all remaining surplus of general funds not spent in FY22 and deposits them into the SBR. This amount is estimated to be approximately $340 million for FY22. This section has a June 30th, 2022 retroactivity date.
That was 340.
340 million.
That is correct, Representative, $340 million through the chair. Page 60, lines 21, page 60, lines 20 through page 62, line 26, big section coming. This is section 14. This is the Alaska Housing Capital Corporation. On the advice of legislative legal, the CS reflects the reappropriations made by the governor in his bill for standing up the two new departments of Family and Community Services and the Department of Health, with funds from the old Department of Health and Social Services are placed into the Alaska Housing Capital Corporation account as in a holding account for funds, since all three departments do not exist at the same time. This appropriation made from this account to the new departments is reflected later in the CS. And to clarify, under the advice of legislative legal, we place all of the reappro money into an account that gets held over and then turned around and deposited later into the new departments at their time of creation. The only other change to this section is that the removal of the words including encumbered amounts, once again, on the advisement of legislative legal, those references were removed because of a constitutional issue, and that legislative legal feels it is resolved through the language of the executive order, so they feel it's not needed to be listed in the bill. And I do believe legislative legal is online if better clarification is needed later. These also have a retroactivity date of June 30th, 2022. Next, on page 64. Page 64, lines 23 through 22 and 23, subsection C. This is the deposit of the POMV's $3.3 billion from the earnings reserve to the general fund. And that's the standard practice of the legislature over the last few years, is taking the full POMV, depositing it into the general fund.
Quickly, Mr. Chairman, just real quick.
Representative LeBon?
Do you know what the effective draw rate is on that 3.3 billion? I'm just curious if you, I mean, the formula calls for 5%, but there's an averaging, a look back, and the effective draw rate is?
Through the chair, I would ask for a lifeline
okay.
through.
That's okay, thank you. That's okay. Just curious.
4.1. Is it 4.1 around?
Okay.
Moving on then to lines 24 and through 27, which is subsection D. This is the PFD payment for Alaskans totaling $840 million, which is basically the 25% split of the POMV. This would provide a $1,250 PFD per person. At this point, I'd kind of like to jump ahead a little bit. If you all could turn to page 90, lines 18 through 22. So once again, page 90, lines 18 through 22. Related to the disbursement of the PFD, we also have a special appropriation in section 38. It's a special appropriation for energy relief. This section authorizes an additional $840.1 million of general funds to be used to provide a one-time energy relief payment of $1,300 per Alaskan. This one-time payment will utilize the PFD as the mechanism for distribution, so it would go out with and alongside the PFD in one sum. Returning back up the page to page 68. Page 68, lines 3 through 6. Under section 20, Department of Education and Early Development, subsection B. This is a $50 million one-time appropriation outside the formula for school districts. This is contingent upon the failure of the passage of a BSA increase legislation, and that contingent language is found later on in the CS towards the bottom of the bill that I will reference later. That was on page 68, lines 3 through 6, subsection D. Staying on page 68, lines 7 through 10, subsection E. After subcommittee closed out, further discussions were had with the department, and this CS reflects the inclusion of the requested $1.6 million for the expansion of the WWAMI program to increase it by 10 participants. But because of the conversations between whether or not the funds would be able to be used in a single year, we've included this as a multi-year appropriation for 23 and 24. Page 68's line 11, going all the way through page 73, line 5. So this is page 68 through 73. These are two sections. Sections 21 and 22, this is the creation of the Department of Family and Community Services and the Department of Health. This is the deposit from the Alaska Housing Capital Corporation and providing the funds from that holding account to the departments from the HCC account referenced earlier. Not reflected in the CS, but under the Department of Law, we've removed the $4 million for statehood defense. The department had reported that they had only spent $270,000 out of the $4 million they had appropriated from last year. So the decision to remove that was made based off of those figures. Additionally, under the Department of Transportation, under the Marine Highway Appropriation, we removed unrestricted general fund backstop language to cover uncollected federal funds. That was removed. This was included last year because there was an uncertainty about the amount of federal funds that were available. This backstop language is not needed this year, so it was removed. Page 75, lines 11 through 21. 75, 11 through 21. This is the University of Alaska, or Section 28. The three projects listed in the governor's budget for the drone program, the rare earth, minerals, and heavy oil are funded by SLRF, like the governor's original request. They were initially changed to UGF in CS 0.5 and have been moved back over to SLRF. Page 80. Page 80, lines 24 through page 81, line 9. Page 80 and 81, this is the Section 31, Federal and Other Program Receipts, subsections E and F. This language provides limits on large RPL requests outside of the typical limited scope of the RPL process. In particular, this excludes the flexible ARPA SLRF funds and funds made available through the Infrastructure Investment Act, or IJA. This was language that we included last year as well, but this will require the governor to come before the legislature for authorization before those federal funds could be spent. Page 86, lines 19 through 21. Page 86. This is fund transfers, or subsection M. This subsection appropriates $10.2 million from the large vessel gaming and gambling tax account to the general fund, because the state will be collecting taxes this year with the cruise season, and the standard practice when we have cruise ships returning is to have the tax collected go into the general fund. Subsection page 86, lines 22 through 24. This is the revenue replacement funds. And if I could reference members to document number 5 on revenue replacement. This shows where $300 million of revenue replacement will go throughout the different departments. The committee will notice that 1/3 of the revenue replacement is found in corrections. And the reason why is because that department has a large amount of general funds that are available for fund swaps without any necessary concern of how it might impact federal match or other requirements on those general funds. Corrections has a large bit of free general funds, so to speak. Page 90, lines 8 through 12. Page 90, lines 8 through 12, sections 36 on shared taxes, subsection G. This clarifies the backstop language for prorating the distribution of revenue. If this is for if the municipal share is greater than the tax collected from the 7 ports. This is a pro-rationing language. Coming up on the end, page 90, lines 23 through 29. Page 90, lines 23 through 29. This is the Statutory Budget Reserve Fund, Section 39, subsections A and B. This authorizes the SBR to be used for deficit fill and deposits any surplus of general funds we might have in FY23 into the SBR account. Finally, pages 91, lines 10 through 13. This is section 42 of the contingency language on page 91. This section is the contingent language mentioned above for the 50 million one-time funding outside the formula. And you'll notice that it does require the passage of HB 272 or a similar bill related to the BSA increase. If that doesn't pass, then this would go into effect. Those are the major significant changes throughout the language section, Mr. Chairman. There are various technical and conforming changes that have been made, but for the sake of time.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And so the initial plan was to take up amendments next week, starting Tuesday, but again, because we're pushing back the whole process with the the spring forecast coming out March 15, everything is going to be pushed back, so we're going to have plenty of time to come back to this and ask questions. So I was hoping that we could adopt this, and then also we've got to adopt the mental health budget and then get to public testimony. If we have any fairly quick questions for now, but like I say, we're going to allow for more time and less rushed questions later. So with that, Representative Josephson.
Super quick question for you, Mr. Co-Chair. I thought that, am I forgetting? I thought March 10th was our hoped-for date.
March 10 was the initial date that we were understanding, though, that would be released, but yesterday we received word that it would be March 15.
Thank you.
So with that, I am going to remove my objection and see if there are any further objections on putting this before us as our committee substitute. And again, from there, we'll be taking up questions, and then after that, we'll take up amendments and so forth. So I see no further questions or objections, and so with that, version N will become the working draft of HB 281 that's before us. And so now we'll take up HB 282, which is the mental health budget, and Representative Merrick, I'd entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I move that the House Finance Committee adopt committee substitute for House Bill 282, Work Draft 32-GH2687I, dated 3/2/2022, as our working document.
Okay, and I will object for the purposes of an explanation. Mr. Anderson?
Once again, for the record, Brody Anderson, staff to Representative Neil Foster. Mr. Chairman, I am glad to report that the only changes made to the mental health budget was done during the subcommittee process and is reflected in the subcommittee closeout reports you have received over the last couple of days. So there are no other changes to report at this time.
Okay, no changes from the governor's version of the budget to what's before us now in this committee substitute.
Subcommittee closeouts, there were
Subcommittee
small
closeout.
changes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions on the CS before us regarding the mental health budget? I see no questions, so with that, I will remove my objection, and I don't see any further objections. So with that, version I will become the working draft. That's before the committee for HB 282. So thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. And so now we'll move over to public testimony. I apologize to the public. We had hoped to roll this out yesterday, and we had set aside time to do the explanation, and things have been pushed back a day or so. But we'll go as long as it takes to make sure that we're hearing from everyone in the public. And looks like right now we've got 50 people lined up. We're going to take these in order of not only time that folks have signed up, but we're going to try to do a round robin between the different locations throughout the state, which at this point it looks like it's just the LIO in Fairbanks. with 3 people. And then we've also got the off-nets. And so actually it looks like we, there might be only 42 plus 3, 45, or else 52. I've got 2 different numbers on here. But with that, we'll be hearing from Fairbanks, Kenai, Matsu, Anchorage, Bethel, Cordova, Kotzebue, Nome, and Utqiagvik from now until 3:30. Actually, like I say, we'll be going longer if we need to. Please be sure to call in or sign in no later than 3 o'clock to make sure that you are put in the line. And we would ask folks to limit their testimony to 2 minutes just to allow everyone to have an opportunity to testify and minimize the wait time that folks towards the end are waiting online. Most LIOs are open and public testimony can be provided in person at those locations. Some communities may be under COVID protocols, and so some testimony will be provided via the off-nets, which fancy way of saying calling from home. We ask testifiers to please hang up after your testimony to keep lines open. We only have so many lines that are available. Testifiers can continue to access the meeting on your computer through akleg.gov, and then you click on the Live Now button. So again, after you've testified, if you could go ahead and hang up and then follow the proceeding at akleg.gov, and then you can click on the Live Now button. It does look like we also have a few people in the Anchorage LIO as well. And then for folks who may not have a computer accessible in front of them but want to continue watching, you can also do so by watching it on Gavel to Gavel on TV. We've got 3 phone numbers if folks are interested in testifying. If you could grab a paper and pen, I'll repeat these twice. For callers outside of Anchorage and Juneau, please call 844-586-9085. And if you're in Anchorage, you can call 907-563-9085. If you're in Juneau, you can either come here to the Finance Committee room and testify, or you can call 907-586-9085. And just to repeat those numbers, if you're calling outside of Anchorage and Juneau, the number is 844-586-9085. If you are in Anchorage, the number is 907-563-9085. And finally, if you're in Juneau, you can call 907-586-9085. And so folks are always welcome to submit testimony in writing to the House Finance Committee, and that's at house.finance@akleg.gov. Again, that is house.finance@akleg.gov. I believe we're taking testimony, at least official testimony, for the budget to be received no later than, I think it was 3 o'clock on Saturday. But folks are always, we can always submit testimony, but I think in terms of just official testimony for the budget, 3 p.m. by Saturday. With that, we'll go ahead and begin. And so we're going to start off with the Fairbanks LIO. We'll jump over to the Anchorage LIO, and then we'll take the off-net callers in order in which folks have called in. Appreciate everybody's patience here. And with that, we're going to start off with James Lowe calling in from Fairbanks. Mr. Lowe, if you can put yourself on the record, state your name and your affiliation, if you're with an organization or if you're just testifying on your own behalf. And then also, if folks could limit their testimony to 2 minutes. So with that, take it away, Mr. Lowe.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is James Lowe. I'm with the Civil Air Patrol, currently the squadron commander of the Fairbanks Squadron. I've been involved in search and rescue in Alaska since 1978. I've been a member of Civil Air Patrol since 1994. For the past 40 years, the Department of Public Safety Aircraft Section has utilized half the Civil Air Patrol hangar in Fairbanks, and they just recently moved to another hangar on the West Ramp. And the agreement we had with the Public Safety Aircraft Section was they would pay half the fuel oil, electric, and water bill, and the annual bill for the hangar roughly is $23,000. So for the past 2 years, I know the the committee has submitted, I believe, $250,000 for Civil Air Patrol. That would be about 10% of what the cost of the hangar is. And the Fairbanks hangar is the biggest hangar in the state, and the only Civil Air Patrol hangar, or the furthest north Civil Air Patrol hangar in the United States. So we currently have 52 senior members, 17 cadets, and we do, I guess with technology changes, we don't do the search and rescues that we have done in the past. We did have an errant ELT Christmas Eve, and it ended up being in a 185 in the North Pole area and not in Santa's sleigh. So currently we do FEMA damage assessments, photo flights after earthquakes, tsunamis, river flooding, and we support 17 cadets in just our squadron, which in the past I've seen a number of the cadets grow up to be productive members of the community here. So anyway, I'm just asking you to continue support with Civil Air Patrol. I'm hoping that the governor's office doesn't line item veto it out, and not sure, I know it's called pass-through money, and I think the State Department of Homeland Security might be the better agency to have that money go through in the future.
Great.
I appreciate the time, and thanks to the chair and the members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lowe. I've got a question from Representative LeBon.
Thank you, Jim, for calling in, and I think the Civil Air Patrol funding enjoys broad support on this committee, so thank you for calling in.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next up in Fairbanks there, we've got former representative, I believe, if that's the only one in Fairbanks there, the only David Guttenberg in Fairbanks, and you know the drill, Mr. Guttenberg, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and illustrious members of the Finance Committee. I can't tell you how delighted I am not to be there. I currently sit on the Borough Assembly, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. They have a legislative priority list, which reflects communities healthy and strong, and you need to go through that because all the things on there reflect how you can do things to make sure that our local communities are healthy and strong. But I want to focus on one thing, and that is community assistance and revenue sharing. We want to make sure that the permanent fund and the energy dividend that you're getting ready to give out isn't hit by increases in borough taxes because of things that happen. When oil prices go up, and it's healthy for the permanent fund, it also costs Alaskans at the pump. And sharing in revenue assistance and that we've done in the past is a very key component. And this is one of the things on the borough's priority list. I want to make sure you know that. But you need to make sure that the citizens of the state don't get hit double, that we're able to fund the things that we need to fund and do the things that locally that are best done locally. Because if they're not done locally, the burden falls on the state. And the state is distant from those functions, and I want to make sure that that is a component of the budget, that we keep our community strong and healthy. So I urge you to put the maximum amount in that you can into revenue sharing and municipal assistance. And with that, I will vacate the next 20 minutes of my testimony and move on.
Thank you very much, former Representative Guttenberg. Do we have any questions from the committee? Former representative used to sit where either Representative Wool is sitting or Representative Joseph is sitting, so we miss seeing you here, Representative. We've got a question or comment from Representative Wool.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Guttenberg, your chair's being kept warm, and I think you might have been in the one I'm sitting in, I'm not sure, and I hope you're enjoying the Borough Assembly.
Great. Thank you for calling in. Next up in Fairbanks at the LIO, we have Jeanette Grast calling in from Fairbanks there. If you can state your name, your affiliation, proceed with your testimony.
Yeah, my name is Jeanette Grasto. I'm the president of NAMI Fairbanks, and I wanted to testify on HB 282. I wanted to thank you for reversing the governor's recommendation to reduce funding to the behavioral health treatment and recovery grants and including a 20% increase to grant providers, and also the 20% increase over the governor's recommendation to behavioral health prevention and early intervention grants. The pandemic has really increased the need for behavioral health treatment and prevention around Alaska. Alaskans are experiencing anxiety because of the pandemic, the loss of jobs, housing, and all those related things. And the thing to remember about mental health treatment, it works if you can get it, and it's hard to get it if your community mental health center has a 2-month waiting list like they did earlier this year. It's not a rare condition, mental illness, but it does respond to treatment, and people can regain recovery and get on with their lives. I'm also want to speak to WWAMI and bringing back the funding and including psychiatrists in the mix, because we definitely have a shortage of mental health providers, and this will help. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Grast. I don't see any questions of the committee. We'll jump over to the Anchorage LIO here, and we've got 3 people there, it looks like. Sherry Metler, if you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Yes, through the chair. My name is Sherry Metler. I am associated with assisted living. I'm a consultant as well as an accountant, have been for many years, all the way from Fairbanks to Kenai. And today we are here in support of the increase to the HSS General Relief Assisted Living Program. And as our time is so limited, the first thing I would like to do is to thank Representative Sponholz for introducing the amendment, and thank also the HSS Finance Subcommittee for approving it. We are also very well aware of those that opened their doors and answered their phones as we made the rounds at various times to bring to the forefront this most crucial issue. I want to thank Representative Josephson, who made time at the very first to hear the plight of the behavioral health donor relief from an assisted living home operator of 5 homes. Today we are here in support of the increase to the HSS General Relief Assisted Living Program for so many reasons, some of which I would like to kind of highlight here. It has been over 20 years since General Relief has had an increase to its daily rate. The level of care of this vulnerable population has certainly increased to those in this last 20-plus years. This rate is all inclusive, which means a provider has to not only supply the room and board, which constitutes a place to live with all of the costs, the food for 3 meals plus snacks on a daily basis, but also many times this population comes to a provider with little or no hygiene items, no clothes for various weather conditions. Truly, many times they arrive at our doors with nothing. A great deal of this population has mental and or addiction issues, constituting a constant redirect by staff. Transportation is an issue, whether it is getting recipients to a bus stop, into a cab, or providing the service in our own provider vehicles. Many times this population needs someone to accompany them to appointments, whether it be to doctors, hospitals, pharmacies, assist with shopping, exercise, socializing, all of which is a part of this assisted living experience and cost to providers. Having read the letter of support that came in from the Alaska State Hospital and Nursing Home Association, we certainly concur with their assessment that with this increase, more assisted living homes would be able to receive this population more readily. In doing so, they would be able to save many dollars over time by getting these individuals into environments that are less expensive to the system and also to other providers, and certainly more accommodating, we have to believe, to the needs and probably desires of the individual.
Ms.
To many
Metler.
of our providers, there is a genuine love and satisfaction in caring for this population, but the cost cannot be borne solely by assisted living homes. Therefore, we totally support the increase to $104.30 from the $70 that has been in effect since June 1st of 2002. With this, I am sure my time is up. So again, thank you, and please accept our sincerest appreciation for all that has been done on this amendment and ushering it forward. I am always available to answer any questions that might arise. Again, thank you all for your attention to this matter and willingness to take this on and see it through the stage of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mettler. I don't see any questions of the committee. Just a reminder to folks, if you'd like, you can also submit your testimony to House Finance, or I'm sorry, yeah, that's correct, to House Finance, I'm sorry, house.finance@akleg.gov. And so if folks are just running up against that time limit, just a reminder, you can submit your testimony as well. So with that, we'll go to Lucy Bauer. There in Anchorage, if you can state your name.
We are submitting these in writing too. Thank you.
If Lucy Bauer could state her name and her affiliation and proceed with her 2-minute testimony.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lucy Bauer. I'm the owner of assisted living homes. I have 5 homes in Anchorage. And I think I have the largest home in Alaska. And as we believe, our job is very important for the community and for individual, for the family. But we really have some hard time. Let's see right now, especially now, we have hard time for hiding the stuff, and we have hard time to keep our door open. And the cost is very high, and for over about 20 years, never changed. So we really need help at this point. And thank you so much for giving us a chance to speak out our needs. And thanks again. I will submit my in writing too. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Bauer. I don't see any questions of the committee. So we'll next go over to Aaron Terry there in Anchorage. If you can state your name, your affiliation, and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Hi, my name is Aaron Terry. I own and operate a 16-bed assisted living home here in Anchorage. And I just want to say thank you for, sorry, I'm nervous.
Oh, it's okay.
I'm going to do mine in writing. Thank you.
Okay. We'll look forward to seeing that. And that was from Aaron Terry. And maybe if the Anchorage LIO person can let us know there, if you're welcome, Ms. Terry, to come back later if you'd like to do your testimony. We'll keep an ear out from our moderator here. Next, we'll go to Kenai, and we've got Mary Nicholson in Kenai. If you could please put yourself on the record, Ms. Nicholson.
Hi, I'm Mary Nicholson, and I have owned and operated Nicholson's Assisted Living here in Kenai for 23 years. We have had, I want to first of all thank you guys for considering this increase in the general relief rate. There's only a few homes down on the Kenai that do take the general relief due to the fact that it is not financially feasible for us to take these type of people in. They are the poorest of the poor and usually the sickest of the sickest, and take a lot of our staffing hours to take care of them. And what I wanted to do was give you guys just a little example. In 2002, when this rate was set, minimum wage was $5.65 an hour. Today, it is $10.34 an hour. That is an 83% increase just in my cost of pay my staff to take care of general relief people. In 2002, the gas price was $1.36 a gallon. Today, it is $3.24 on average, $4 at most places. That is a 157% increase in the gas to get my people to and from wherever they need to go. Please consider these percentages when you consider this increase. I would like to continue to take general relief. However, with the prices going up, these percentages, I can no longer afford to do so.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Ms. Nicholson? I don't see any from the committee. Thank you so much for your testimony. We will now move over to, let's see, I think we might have possibly another LIO who came online. Let's see. No, we do not. So we're going to move over to the off-nets. And again, we're taking these in order, the order in which folks called in. And so in Wasilla, we've got Greg Mansky. If you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Greg Mansky, and I'm here to represent Access Alaska because they've been actually really good help for me, and they've been doing a lot of things to back me up in things that I need to have done, and I just really appreciate them. And so they need to get some more money so they can, so they can stay open, so they can help out other people like me out, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So no questions from anybody? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mansky. We'll now move over to Gordon Glazier. If you can state your name and your affiliation.
Yes, my name is Gordon Glazier. I live at 1029 Potlatch Circle, and I'll be speaking for myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm the former chair of the Alaska Commission on Aging, and the chair of the Anchorage Senior Activity Center. And in the last couple of weeks, you've heard a lot of us from AARP, and Commission on Aging, and AgeNet. And I think you hear a common theme. And again, I'm going to be speaking in favor of the $985,000 increase in services. You know better than I the cost of food, transportation, and hiring of staff. It's gotten to the point where agencies are not able to hire personal care attendants and other frontline workers. That's a problem in your community, and I think if you check with your own senior centers or programs, you'll find that out. You've heard people speak in terms of general relief. This is an enabling funding source. Many hospitals have to keep people in the hospital rather than being into a facility because there's no facility that will take general relief to service their persons. And oftentimes the general relief are just funding as a bridge until the Medicaid, they're qualified for Medicaid and go into those facilities. So that block of money gets them out of a hospital bed to a less restrictive center. Having worked with these different agencies, and again, I'm speaking for myself, at this point, having worked with them from one end of the state to the other, this is a common problem. Having salaries to be able to recruit and retrain some people to compete with other people so that these services can be provided. And if you have any questions on that, I suggest you talk to your local assisted living or senior center, and they will be more than happy to confirm what I am saying. I want to thank the chair and the committee for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Glaser. I don't see any questions from the committee, and so we'll go over to Jean Holt calling in from Palmer. If you can state your name and your affiliation. Jean, are you there? Jean Holt, maybe either we're on mute or we'll come back to her in a moment. We'll go over to Kevin McCoy calling in from Anchorage. Mr. McCoy, if you can state your name, your affiliation, and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kevin McCoy, and I'm here to testify on my own behalf. By way of background, I live in Anchorage, and I've been in Alaska since 1976. I had a career practicing law for 44 years, and I'm now retired. I know that you have a lot on your plate, but I'm here to express my profound dissatisfaction with the governor's proposed supplemental appropriation, where he is asking the legislature to to fund the $500,000 settlement in Blanford versus Dunleavy. This proposed supplemental appropriation is troubling because the governor is asking the legislature to provide funds to settle litigation after a court has found that the governor and his former chief of staff are personally responsible for their unconstitutional loyalty oath scheme. The problem here is that the legislature is being presented with a fait accompli. The legislature is being asked to fund a settlement after a court comprehensively ruled that the governor's conduct and the conduct of his former chief of staff was so egregious that they, and not the state, should pay for the harm that was caused by their unconstitutional scheme. But here's the dilemma. If the legislature funds the settlement, the governor and his former chief of staff do not pay for their misconduct. If the legislature refuses to fund the settlement, the governor and his former chief of staff still do not have to pay. And if the legislature refuses to fund the settlement, the $500,000 settlement remains an obligation of the state. The case, Blanford versus Dunleavy, has since been dismissed with prejudice and cannot be resurrected if the legislature rejects the proposed appropriation. In my opinion, this kind of self-dealing has become so disturbing that I've lost faith in the Department of Law's commitment to the rule of law. Remember that this is the department that authorized the immediate release of Angela Rodell's personnel file because it suited the governor's interests, but continues to block release of former Attorney General Kevin Clarkson's personal file and the release of former Acting Attorney General Ed Sniffin's personal file. Just as importantly, this department has not yet taken action necessary to resolve the allegations of sexual misconduct by the former Acting Attorney General. And we know that this is the department that refused to defend the campaign finance law that this legislature enacted, opening the door to unlimited campaign financing in our next election. I submit that this governor's proposed self-dealing should not go unnoticed. I have two suggestions regarding the Blanford versus Dunleavy supplemental appropriation request.
Mr. McCoy, if you could please wrap up.
First, I think the legislature should consider legislation that prohibits a governor from using state funds to settle cases whenever a trial court rejects his or her qualified immunity claim. If the governor wants to challenge an adverse qualified immunity claim, he or she should be required to appeal rather than settle.
Mr. McCoy.
This does nothing about the current situation, but it may prevent it from happening in the future. Second, if the legislature does decide to fund the settlement, the legislature should consider reducing the governor's office budget by the amount of the settlement. I recognize that this proposal is somewhat confrontational, and it imitates the governor's veto of the legislature's per diem and his veto of the court budget. But that said, I don't know any other way under these circumstances that this legislature can effectively discourage this sort of self-dealing by a governor in the future. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I welcome any questions that you might have.
Okay. Do we have any questions of the committee? I see no questions. Thank you, Mr. McCoy. And just a reminder to testifiers, if your testimony goes long, please, you're also welcome to submit your testimony to house.finance@akleg.gov. Again, that's house.finance@akleg.gov. We'll try for Jean Holt again in Palmer. Ms. Holt, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, and if you can state your name.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you can state your name and
Okay.
your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Okay, my name is Jean Holt, and I'm from Palmer, Alaska, but I'm calling from Lake Louise, so hopefully the call's going to go through. I want to make comment to the House Finance Committee on operating budget HB 281. I do want to bring up that you might want to consider to reschedule the public testimony so the public actually has the opportunity to review what they are testifying about with changes happening so fast, especially with the PFD. The reality is this energy relief check is the other half of the dividend that was due to Alaskans in 2021 when the legislature majority only paid half of what was statutory due. This energy relief check is a bribe to buy our vote. And also, it's also that the legislators are trying to convince us that they're here to help with a new formula for the PFD.
reduce PFD for years to come, and then maybe promise they may look at a higher PFD as conditions change. The testimony yesterday was special interest from state and capital budget, but when you have special interest groups with lobbyists in Juneau wanting more and more each year, and then when testimony was taking place, they were saying that they needed more since oil revenues are increasing. The bloated budget has not gone down, not even attempting to reduce it. After 6 years of the PFD cluster from Walker, we Alaskans are still standing up and will continue to fight for you to follow the law and pay the full statutory PFD. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Holt. And for anybody out there who would like to have a little more time to look at what's in the budget, and I would invite folks to also testify tomorrow as well. There's another opportunity on Saturday, I think, when most folks are off work. So I just wanted to let folks know. Also, we're slowing down this whole process, and so we won't be taking up amendments next week. And so members of the public are welcome to submit written testimony if they'd like. Again, the email address to the Finance Committee is house.finance@akleg.gov. And so there'll be more time for the public to take a look at this. So with that, we'll go over next to Trevor Storrs in Anchorage. If you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Trevor Storrs, President and CEO of the Alaska Children's Trust. The Children's Trust is the statewide lead organization focused on the prevention of child abuse and neglect. In other words, we work towards ensuring children, youth, and families thrive. While we support numerous appropriations in this year's operating and mental health budgets, I will use my time to address 4 in particular. First, we applaud the commitment shown in this year's budget to more effectively resource the Office of Children's Services, supporting frontline social workers, prevention programming, and foster care youth. Among U.S. states, Alaska is ranked 43rd for child well-being by the National Kids Count program. Each year, thousands of child abuse and neglect cases are substantiated by OCS. Frontline social workers are just that, on the front line supporting our children and families in crisis. They help families on the brink and, at times, preventing child maltreatment before it occurs. OCS plays a significant role in keeping kids and families supported, connected, and safe, and this year's budget takes a strong step towards ensuring their success. Second, we strongly support the increased funding to support the work of the Alaska Native tribes and tribal organizations participating in tribal child welfare compacting. Alaska Native children make up 15% of the state's general population, but represent approximately 65% of the kids in state custody. Compacting will ensure cultural appropriate interventions and support for these children. Third, we're pleased to see K-12 education fully funded and strongly support the $50 million one-time increase to the base student allocation included in the recent CS. Finally, we strongly support the added funding for pre-K grants to the Department of Education and hope to see an increased commitment to early education as the session and budget process continue. The evidence is clear and consistent. Pre-K is known to improve educational outcomes for young children before entering the K-12 system, let alone helping address many of the social, physical, and behavioral ills that are addressed by communities on a day-to-day basis.
Mr. Storrs?
In Alaska, less than 1/3 of all students demonstrate kindergarten readiness, and those are our pre-pandemic numbers. If we truly want to see Alaska's children succeed in education, it's time to invest in pre-K. At a time when child and youth development is more critical than ever, we must invest in our kids and the families and the agencies that care for them. Therefore, we thank the governor and the legislature for this renewed commitment to adequately resource services across the Department of Health and the Department of Family and Community Services, and for helping ensure Alaska's children, youth, and families thrive.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you for this opportunity to testify today.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Storrs. Do we have any questions of the committee? I don't see any questions. And again, just for folks, if you've got testimony beyond 2 minutes, feel free to submit, or if you don't have testimony that goes long, but you'd still like to submit it, please do. You can do so in writing by submitting that to house.finance@akleg.gov. Next, we'll go over to Helen Howarth, and calling in from Cordova. If you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Thank you. My name is Helen Howarth. I am city manager of the city of Cordova. The city of Cordova, we're focused on economic development as we emerge from the pandemic, and I have 4 points to make for your consideration today. Number one, as a coastal community, we rely heavily on the state ferry system for transportation and freight, and we support the state's continued efforts to modernize the fleet, improve management, and identify service improvements. Number two, I heard today that support is emerging for 100% school bond debt reimbursement and full capitalization of the Community Assistance Fund, and we cannot be happier. These 2 programs are critically important for small communities like ours, and we applaud this direction. Secondly, I would like for you all to consider using the state's windfall oil revenues to help communities access and leverage federal infrastructure dollars. And I want to offer 2 what I consider to be win-win ideas for your consideration. First, most federal grant programs require between 10 to 20% in non-federal match, and state assistance with these matching requirements would make the difference for many of our Alaskan communities between being able to apply for and access federal infrastructure dollars or not. And secondly, and this is where Cordova really could use some help right now, help backstop the unexpected COVID-related inflation of capital construction costs to get shovel-ready, designed and engineered, and competitively funded projects to the finish line. Cordova has worked really hard to secure $32 million in construction funding to rebuild our vital harbor infrastructure. We were ready to get this project going this fall until we discovered that in a mere 8 months, the time between when we last got cost estimates and today, that the cost of construction has gone up 40%. So our $32 million project is now a $42 million project, and we're at risk of losing federal funds or incurring significant project delays if we can't find a way to cover the cost increases. What we're doing is actively looking for additional funding and identifying ways to cut costs without undermining the harbor improvements needed to support our commercial fishing industry. So additional state investment of $2 million, which is 40% of the state's initial $5 million harbor Tier 1 grant, would allow our project to proceed to construction this fall. And finally, with the many federal dollars set to be distributed through the state, please be sure to adequately fund any state agency being asked to develop and administer programs to push out those infrastructure dollars. It's really hard to imagine how any of the agencies that I know are fairly working pretty lean right now can be expected to successfully deploy these resources with static budgets. So I encourage you to just consider that. And I thank all of you for your dedicated efforts to find solutions that have long-term impacts for all of our communities.
Thank you, Ms. Howarth. I don't see any questions from the committee, and a reminder to folks, if testimony goes over 2 minutes, you're welcome to submit your testimony in writing to house.finance@akleg.gov. Next, we'll move over to Daniel Stanton, calling in from Anchorage. Mr. Stanton, if you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Oh, good. And thank you, committee. So I am Daniel Stanton. I own a 5-bed assisted living home for mentally ill people, Anchored Abode Assisted Living Home in Anchorage. I wanted to thank Ms. Netter and Ms. Bauer for their details regarding SB 281, the general relief funding. They said a lot already. They probably took 80% of what I was going to say. But I wanted to actually say something kind of practical. I hope this will give a good perspective of the differences between 2002 and now. So as a 5-bed facility, I only have 5 people, but that takes 5 people that are potentially homeless off the street, okay? Like over 50% of the people that are homeless have mental illness, particularly chronic schizophrenia is a major problem. Then we have people that over 60% have addiction and alcohol problems, and duly diagnosed. Over 48% are duly diagnosed. So having 5 beds takes 5 people off the street, and the only way these vulnerable people can be safely housed in an assisted living home is through general relief. There is no other funding. These people are completely indigent, and like I believe Ms. Bauer and Ms. Metter said, they have nothing. They come to us with nothing. I mean, they walk in the door, and we first have to give people a shower because that's really the condition that people come to us in. They have nothing. So when you think about $70 a day, it's for 20 years, it's kind of sad, but let me put it this way. I pay my employees. I have 2 employees who work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. in 2 shifts, $16 an hour. It's a fair wage, okay? That costs me $192 a day. On top of that, I have to pay taxes, food, mortgage, utility, internet, and numerous other business expenses, which total about $200 a day. All total, in general, on a good day, it costs me almost $400 a day to run my assisted living home.
Mr. Stanton, if you
4
could
out of
wrap it
5
up.
of my clients paid $70 a day. That gives me $280 a day to run that business. I have 1 waiver client who I've had for 12 years.
Mr. Stanton, if you could wrap it up.
I'm sorry?
Oh, if you could wrap it up.
Yes.
Your 2 minutes is up.
Basically, what I'm saying is an increase of to $104.30 is very good. I appreciate that. About $40 difference was really the perfect range, but I'm okay with almost $35, and I appreciate everything you all are doing. Thank you for making this an important part of your budget this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. I don't see any questions of the committee, and so with that, we'll go over to Selena Hopkins-Kendall, calling in from Anchorage. If you can state your name, your affiliation, and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Selena Hopkins-Kendall. I'm the chair of the board of Best Beginnings. I also ran a large preschool for about 4 years, and I'm the mom of 2 great kids who really benefited from high-quality early childhood education so that they could learn and grow, and I could go to work. And I really want that opportunity for every Alaskan family that wants it. So today, I would like to thank the committee for the additional funding for pre-K and early childhood education that was put into the budget. And I hope that these funds will be kept in as the process moves forward. This funding is very important to Alaska's kids and families, and it will also help a lot of other programs that are in the works right now. As you probably know, high-quality early childhood education is very important to help kids get ready for school and has lifelong improved outcomes, and it helps parents get to work. Running and staffing an early childhood education center, like I did, is very hard, but these are small businesses that need our support, and their employees, the teachers and providers, need our support so that they can provide high-quality, affordable, and available care to Alaska's families. I also want to make sure that the committee is aware, in general, that early childhood education does not begin at 3 or 4 years old. Learning begins at birth, and many, many families need quality care pretty quickly after that, unfortunately. So I want to thank you all again for including additional pre-K and early childhood education funding in the budget. And I want to encourage you to keep supporting high-quality, affordable, available care for all Alaska's kids and families. And thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Hopkins-Kendall. I don't see any questions of the committee. We'll next move over to Denise Gilroy, calling in from Nome. If you can state your name, your affiliation, and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Thank you, Co-Chair. On behalf of Independent Living Centers, I'm testifying for HB 281, Representative Joseph's 1.4 increment, 586,000 to independent living centers and 912,000 for seniors. I am Denise Gilroy. I work for Arctic Access, which is one of 4 independent living centers in the state of Alaska. Within our region, from Zabunga to Point Hope, We have the North Arctic and Norton Sound. We support 30 villages and 2 hubs, Kotzebue and Nome. Last year, we had the opportunity and ability to support 493 seniors, elders, and persons experiencing disabilities. Each CIL is extremely unique, Centers for Independent Living. So we are unique not only to the region, but to the individual communities and villages' personal needs. Through these services, we save the state, Medicare, and Medicaid money, keeping people at home in less restrictive living environments and out of assisted living homes via medical equipment support, home supports, among many, many, many other services. Thank you for your time. I appreciate each and every one of you. And in closing, I would just like to say thank you from the 4 independent living centers in the state of Alaska. Thank you for supporting Representative Josephson's proposal, the $1.4 million increment, including the $586,000 for independent living centers and $912 for senior grants. Thank you, Co-Chair. Appreciate your time.
Great, thank you. I don't see any questions. We'll next move over to Ellen Ganley, calling in from Fairbanks. If you can state your name, your affiliation, and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Hi, this is Ellen Ganley. I live in Fairbanks. I'm retired, and I'm representing myself today with my testimony. I'm calling to encourage you to fund the 13% increment to the senior grant services line. Those services fund things like senior centers around the state, Meals on Wheels, education, adult day services, transportation, and help with chores around the house. These services cost an average of $509 a day and are a good investment. The one area I wanted to talk to you about was the grant funding of support for family caregivers. A number of years ago, my sister and I were assisting our mother in caring for our father who had dementia. And we were kind of at a loss for a while in terms of just knowing what to do and how to do it. And we found a series of classes that was given by one of the grants, one of the nonprofits funded through the Senior Grant Services. And we learned about dementia. We learned about what he was experiencing. We learned about what to expect. And it made a huge impact on our lives and on his life, I think. We were able to make him comfortable, and we were able to make him feel safe. And those were very important things at the time. Had we not had that training, that education, we might well have had to revert to having him in a nursing home. And the costs there are $175,000 a year per person. So I personally have felt the power of these services, and I encourage you to continue funding them and with the 13% increment. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Ganley. We've got a question from Representative Laban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ellen, thank you for calling in and for your patience. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir, Representative Laban.
Thank you, Ms. Ganley. Next, we'll go to William Edwards, calling in from Nome. If you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, William.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, if you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Okay, my name is William Edwards, and I'm calling in support of House Bill 281. I came to Alaska as a minor, Nome, Alaska, and while I was here, I got a severe head injury. I have no family here, so I reached out and found Denise Gilroy and she helps me through my problems. And I just wanted to start with, thank God for Arctic Access. Everything they do and have done for me, and the things they do in the community would have, if there wasn't Arctic Access, these people and myself would have no outreach. From the people, from the babies to the old people, she does wheelchair ramps, food, clothing, shopping, paperwork, jobs, housing. She even is out helping the street people. I see this lady doing everything. I would like to, there would be a lot of people that don't have have an avenue if there was no Arctic Access in Denise Gilroy. I'm grateful for the services, and I know that people here in town are grateful too. Everyone knows, everyone knows about her and knows the things that she does. She's everywhere, and programs like hers, and there's other programs like this throughout Alaska. Without this help, these people would be out of there would be nobody to help us. And I'm in support of the House Bill 281, and I thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I don't see any questions of the committee, so next we'll go over to John Erickson in Yakutat. If you can state your name, your affiliation, proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Yes, my name is John Erickson. I've been the city manager in Yakutat, Alaska for about 8 years. And I wanted to talk about our needs in a coastal community. A few of the things that, of course, we are backing is, support for the ferries, PCE, and community assistance. But the two areas I wanted to focus on is the harbor matching grant. We've been saving our money for, since the harbors were turned over to boroughs and communities, and we've been counting our pennies, and this year we came and we scored #1 in the community assistance for matching grant for harbors, Tier 1. And it wasn't in the budget, and I'm just concerned that it's going to be left out. So that would be my urging to make sure that that stays in the budget. The other thing is we have a PFAS problem at the airport, and I've suggested to DEC and the legislatures and so on to take care of it. We can extend our water line about 1.5 miles or 2 miles, and that would solve the issue. My problem is I got a hold of Valley Safe Water and THC, and great programs. I use them all the time, but they don't score PFAS as a need. So we have a facility there that is probably generates 15% of our revenue in the city, and we have they have to ship in pallets of bottled water because of the DOT's pollution from PFAS. And that's really all, and I really appreciate it, and thank you for your time. I am always available for questions.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Erickson. You had mentioned that you're concerned you hadn't seen the Harbor Fund money in the budget, and that should be forthcoming, or that will be addressed when the capital budget is rolled out later, and so I just wanted to maybe ease your mind a little bit on that. So.
Well, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned it. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, we appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mr. Erickson. And so next up, we have Rhonda Burnett calling in from Nome. If you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Yes, Representative Foster and co-chair. My name is Rhonda Burnett from Nome. I am the reentry case manager. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I want to support the bill HB 281, giving funds for the independent living. Arctic Access works closely with my reentry program to support the people being released from jail. Arctic Access partners with my program, helping the community in finding housing, jobs, clothing, filing for Social Security disability, and being a payee. I really support Senator Josephson's increment increase of $1.4 million, which includes $586,000 for independent living centers and $912,000 for senior grants. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I don't see any questions from the committee. So next we'll go over to Nikki Eisman calling from Esther. If you can state your name and your affiliation. Nikki Eisman. All right, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. All right. Let me pull up my testimony here. Sorry. Okay. My name is Nikki Eisman. I'm a 47-year resident of Fairbanks, a retired children's librarian and fourth grade teacher, and a grandmother of 3 upcoming Fairbanks students, and I'm speaking on my own behalf. I'm testifying today in support of increased financial support for education and specifically for an increase to the base student allocation, which, as you know, has been flat funded for the past 7 years, all the while fixed costs have increased. Flat funding for the BSA has effectively resulted in 7 years of cuts to education, of state cuts. Flat funding runs counter to the Department of Education's mission statement, an excellent education for every student every day. What do 7 years of flat BSA look like at the local level? Increased class sizes, cuts in math, science, and language arts, cuts in workforce development programs, and cuts in elective programs from STEM to sports to the arts. New teachers, threatened by the constant reality of pink slips, leave the profession. Potential teachers choose not to enter the profession when they hear of the lack of stability. Businesses and families move to municipalities because of the quality of their schools, and likewise families leave. Here in Fairbanks, we worked hard to bring the F-35s to our community. We promised Air Force families rich educational opportunities. While the airmen are assigned to Eielson Air Force Base, their families are not. Will Fairbanks schools bring them and keep them here? Strong schools affect the entire community and, as you know, are an essential part of its economic engine. UA President Pat Pitney, during her State of the University address, spoke of the importance of workforce development and of developing local talent. That local talent development starts with K-12 education. The Fairbanks North Borough School District has just implemented a sweeping efficiency program in its efforts to save money, including the heartbreaking move of closing 3 elementary schools. And I believe that Representative LeBon was on the school board that helped build one of those schools that was just closed. Locally here in Fairbanks, we're doing our part, but this alone is not enough to make up for the 7 years of a flat BSA. No school district in our state can give students the education they need and deserve without the state stepping up to do its constitutionally mandated part. The State Department of Education can't meet its own goals for recruitment and retention without an increase to the BSA. The state won't be able to meet its own 5 measurable goals without an increase to the base student allotment.
Ms. Eisman? I'm sorry, if you could wrap up. Thank you. We've got a question from Representative Wool.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nikki, I just wanted to say thanks for calling, and also thanks for your contribution to the News Miner. I just read, and I agree the BSA does need an adjustment. Thank you.
Well, we're worried about our schools. Anyway, thank you all for being there.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Eisman. And next up, we've got Lance Johnson calling in from Nome. If you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Thank you, Co-Chair Foster and members of the House Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Lance Johnson. I'm the Administrative Director for Behavioral Health Services at Norton Sound Health Corporation in Nome. Liz, I appreciate your tireless work on both HB 281 and 282. I know it's not easy. And I really thank you for understanding that increased funding for behavioral health services is paramount. Restoring the cuts to the governor's budget and proposing a 20% addition to the behavioral health treatment and recovery grant line is a great step in the right direction after years of cuts and flat funding that have many providers truly treading water, and as a result, many people in danger of not receiving the services they need and richly deserve. There's a misconception out there, by the way, that grants supporting behavioral health services are no longer needed with the implementation of the 1115 waiver, and that those new services will financially and effectively replace any grant-funded services. That is a huge unknown right now. We don't have the baseline established to figure out what those revenues will look like. In the meantime, there's exorbitant costs to go ahead and stand up those services. The fact is, cutting or flat funding the grants undermines and seriously threatens the successful implementation of the 1115 waiver. Not all behavioral health services are funded through the waiver. That includes the startup costs, as I mentioned. It takes time, it takes money, it takes more workforce to get these new service lines on board. We've got training costs. There's requirements to have certified providers providing these services under the 1115. Those are not funded through the 1115 services. We've got escalating administrative costs, and the prevention and early intervention activities that are so important for keeping people out of the emergency room in the back of police cars aren't funded through that. So these grants are wholly important. I believe that the new services under the 1115 will benefit many in ways not previously available. I truly believe that. However, without the ongoing support of behavioral health grants, we're in real danger of providing fewer services over time rather than more. As providers, we understand more than most what is needed to effectively support service provision in a continuum of care. Flat funding no longer is acceptable, nor should we be satisfied with it as providers, especially when the cost to provide services increase every year. I thank you for recognizing that and having your level of enthusiasm match the funding that you're proposing to put into this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We have any questions? I don't see any questions. And so next we'll go over to Kara Moriarty, calling in from Anchorage. If you can state your name and your affiliation.
Chairman Foster, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Kara Moriarty, and I'm the president and CEO of the Alaska Oil and Gas Association. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and thank you very much for including in the bill the governor's requested amount for the oil and gas tax credits for this fiscal year of FY23, but especially for the $60 million that we actually just talked about yesterday in the supplemental, because this supplemental, this funding that would make the FY22 minimum payment whole is really important in the supplemental because it will get to our members faster. Providing this funding for the full statutory minimum for both now FY22 and 23 is very important as it sends a message to investors, the companies, the explorers, the refineries, and financial institutions that Alaska is a great place to do business. So thank you again for your leadership.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Moriarty. I don't see any questions. So next we'll go over to Amber Vasca, calling in from Fairbanks. If you can state your name and your affiliation, proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Good afternoon, co-chairs Foster and Merrick and the members of the House Finance Committee. Thank you for the time today to testify. For the record, I'm Amber Vasca. I'm Yupik and an Aniak tribal member living here in Fairbanks. I currently serve as the Executive Director of Tribal Government and Client Services with the Tanana Chiefs Conference. The TCC region covers an area of 235,000 square miles in interior Alaska, serving 42 interior communities, including 37 federally recognized tribes. I am calling today to highlight a handful of important elements found within the House Committee substitute for the operating and mental health budgets. TCC supports the subcommittee increments to the Department of Health and Social Services, specifically the $45 million for Medicaid to meet the increased utilization during the pandemic, the $346,000 increment for behavioral health prevention and early intervention grants, and the $959,000 increment for behavioral health treatment and recovery grants. TCC also supports the governor's proposed full funding for community assistance and school bond debt reimbursements and the REAs. We support the $50 million subcommittee increment to the K-12 public education-based student allocation, and we support the subcommittee's $1.5 million increment to the public broadcasting for radio stations in communities under 20,000 people. We also support a sustainable budget, a sustainable permanent fund dividend formula, and urge this body to seek new revenue options. TCC, along with our partners in the Alaska Regional Coalition, which includes us, TCC, Manilik, Kowarik, Chugachmute, and the Central Council Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska, on behalf of the 100 communities and approximately 65,000 people we represent, we wish to express support for the proposed fiscal year 23 Department of Public Safety budget items for the Village Public Safety Officer Program, including the full grant funding, the salary increase, a tribal liaison, and the resources to bring on an additional 10 BPSOs.
Ms.
These are
Vasquez?
exactly the kind of measures that can help with recruitment and retention and strengthen this critically important rural public safety program.
Ms. Vasca, thank you so much for calling in. If you have further testimony, you can submit it to house.finance@akledge.gov. We sure appreciate you calling. Next up in Fairbanks is Tom Chard. Mr. Chard, if you could state your name, affiliation, and begin your 2-minute testimony.
Sure thing. Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Tom Chard. I'm the CEO of the Alaska Behavioral Health Association. ABHA is the state's umbrella network for mental health and substance abuse treatment providers throughout the state. I'll keep my comments brief. First, we'd like to thank House Health and Social Services Subcommittee for their work and the support of behavioral health. We urge this committee to adopt the subcommittee recommendations. Specifically, we're respectfully asking you to reject the governor's original cut to behavioral health treatment and recovery, support the modest increase to the behavioral health treatment and recovery grants, as well as the prevention and early intervention grants, and support the update to the general relief rate paid to the assisted living homes and facilities. We appreciate the thoughtful and thorough approach you're taking to evaluating the federal funds coming into the state, additional oil revenue, and other resources available. Please continue to look for ways to support behavioral health treatment so we can help Alaskans get back to work, get back to school, get back to their family, and get back to living life. Thank you for your ongoing work and your continued support for Alaskans' behavioral health.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chard. Thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate it. Next in Anchorage, Katie Bender. Ms. Bender, if you could state your name, affiliation, and please begin your 2-minute testimony.
Thank you, Representative. Good afternoon. My name is Katie Bender, and I live in South Anchorage. I am the president of the UAA Alumni Association Board of Directors. I am a proud alumna and would like to express my support for the subcommittee's recommendations for the University of Alaska budget. Our university is a cornerstone of economic development and plays a major role in diversifying our state's economy. I work for an Alaskan company, and we believe in hiring UA grads because of the quality of their education and to keep Alaskans in the state to help grow the state's economy. After 3 years of extreme austerity, it is important to look at how we can invest in our state's future, and the subcommittee's recommendations are a good way to start. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you will support the subcommittee's recommendations for the University of Alaska budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bender. We appreciate your testimony. Next in Seldovia, Randy Sweet. If you could state your name, affiliation, and please begin your 2-minute testimony.
To the chair and members of the committee, my name is Randy Sweet. I'm representing myself from Seldovia, Alaska, and I'm here today to ask for your support for the $912,200 increment to senior community-based grants proposed by the House Finance Subcommittee. These programs help Alaskans in their homes. My friend who lives in the lower 48 was worried about her brother living in Soldotna, a Vietnam-era vet who was medically fragile and stretched financially. She was sending him food. We brainstormed and were able to connect him with Meals on Wheels through the senior center. It was enough for him to get good meals, reduce financial pressure, and someone to check on him who can contact his sister if needed. Today, more seniors need help, and flat funding and inflation are impacting service levels. Most of all, this increment helps support Alaskans to stay at home at a lower cost than in a facility. This is a win-win for vulnerable Alaskans and the state. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We sure appreciate you calling today. In Wasilla, we have Crystal Nygaard. Crystal, if you could state your name, affiliation, and please begin your 2-minute testimony.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Crystal, please go ahead.
Well, I want to thank all of you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Crystal Nygaard. I'm the Deputy Administrator for the City of Wasilla, and I'm here to testify today in support of HB 281, specifically the GEO bonds. This includes the development of the Wasilla Airport and the terminal. This project will be an economic engine, not only for the city, but for this region, and will contribute to the food security conversation that is currently going on. We have seen the importance of a strong infrastructure that provides great jobs, continued economic investment into our region, and offers connection to other parts of our state, especially when we have disasters like earthquakes where there are no bridges to access Anchorage. So we thank you for your time, your support, and growing our local economy.
Thank you, Ms. Nygaard, and I will just note that the GEO bonds are not part of this operating budget, but that will be looked at later when we're looking at the capital budget, but we sure appreciate that. Next, in Fairbanks, Keisha Simmons, if you could state your name, affiliation, and please begin your 2-minute testimony.
Hi, my name is Keisha Simmons. I'm in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I'm representing myself. I'm an individual with a disability. I was injured at the age of 15 in a car accident, very unexpected, of course, and as a result, I'm paralyzed from the chest down, and so I rely on caregivers for everything to do throughout my day. Despite that, though, I have a really incredible life. I was able to get a master's degree at UAF and have been working for 20 years. Very proud to be a taxpayer, working full-time, also do a lot of contracting on the side, and just always active in my community. And the reason I'm sharing my story is because I'm calling in to support the item regarding the waiver list in the intellectual developmental disability waiver wait list that's happening. I already have a waiver, so really this doesn't affect me, but I do have to speak to it because I will say that there are so many people who are on that wait list that want to be community members, that don't want to be on welfare, would love to go to school and be working and contribute to our community, but instead are sitting at home collecting welfare. Their parents can't go to work because they're providing caregiving. And so I just hope that you will consider that and get those people off the wait list so that they can contribute to our community and their family members are able to go to work as well. It's a win-win for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Keisha. We sure appreciate you calling today. Next, in Big Lake, Bert Hoftailing, if you could state your name, affiliation, and please begin your 2-minute testimony.
Hi, my name is Bert Hoftailing. I'm from Big Lake. I represent myself, my child, and her future, and about 4,000 other people that like to listen to what I have to say here in Alaska. I was wondering if you guys actually knew the difference between a lawmaker and a lawbreaker. A lawmaker is one that follows the laws, and if the laws are not working for them, they change them. And that's what a lawmaker does. A lawbreaker, they just ignore the existing laws and they just rewrite new ones and continue on to say that those laws are the ones that we now follow, even though the other laws are still there. I don't see anything that you guys are presented inside of this budget that shows that we have a group of lawmakers making the current state budget for spending out there. If we were to follow the law, the student base allocation is a good example. We've had a 10% reduction in the students that are going to school in the state of Alaska. Shouldn't that mean there should be a 10% reduction to that budget? Instead, you guys are now increasing it by $50 million for the worst education in the nation that is actively promoting and educating or indoctrinating, I should say, CRT to our children. If we were to follow the law, you guys have a surplus in revenue that is far beyond what you have seen since 2014. It far encompasses, outpaces the current budget that you currently have. Yet you're still implementing SB26, your POMV law, and stating that you can't spend nothing above that, even though it's a conflicting law with our statutory PFD law. If we were to remove the permanent fund dividend out of the budget as you have it placed right now, you have an overabundant surplus of tax revenue to pay for the budget and also put away the extra into the savings into the CBR. But like drunken sailors, I'm watching you, and so is the rest of Alaska, spending that extra tax revenue saying you're going to give us a stimulus check that is going to help us with the raising prices to be able to cost the food, fuel, heating, etc. 50 cents in just the last 3 days, we watched our gas prices jump at the pump. And you think that trying to give us $1,300, I see it as more of a bribe for your upcoming election than actually.
Okay, Bert, well, thank you very much for calling. We appreciate hearing from you. And I will just note that the $50 million education increase in the operating budget is conditional on it. That only happens if the BSA increase does not pass. So those will not both happen, either one or the other. So thank you so much for calling. Next in Fairbanks, Brandy Hardy. Please state your name, affiliation, and begin your 2-minute testimony.
Hi, my name is Brandy Hardy. I am a lifelong Alaskan born and raised in Fairbanks, Alaska. I'm the product of the Alaskan schools and have chosen to raise my own children in Alaska. Growing up, I benefited from a top-notch public education that included small class sizes, being offered multiple AP classes in high school, a vast array of extracurricular sports opportunities, and the ability to participate in band and orchestra starting in 3rd grade, plus a robust arts program from elementary school to high school. As a mother of 2 current elementary school students, I am worried that my own children will not be afforded these same opportunities. I am so grateful for my amazing education that set me up to be successful in adulthood. When my husband left active duty military service, the decision was made to raise our children in my home of Alaska because of the experiences I had growing up and attending school here. I'm also a dual certified elementary and special education teacher who has taught in our local schools. I know firsthand the toll the yearly pink slips and devastating cuts to our programs has had on our educational staff. We're hemorrhaging our teachers at unprecedented rates. With all this in mind, I am pleading with you to please increase the state's BSA. We cannot continue to flat fund our schools. We cannot continue to raise class sizes, close schools, and cut programs and think this won't affect the quality of our children's education. We are quite literally robbing Alaska of its future by continuing to refuse to effectively fund our schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brandy. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us today. Next, also in Fairbanks, is Garrison Collette. If you could please state your name, your affiliation, and begin your 2-minute testimony.
Hi, my name is Garrison Collette, for the record, and I'm self-employed as a freelance writer and energy rater. Distinguished Chairs Foster and Merrick, Vice Chair Ortiz, and illustrious members of the Finance Committee, thank you for your time this afternoon. I understand that energy and minerals have been getting a lot of attention lately. I entered the energy field in the year 2000, learning how to grow solar cells from fat and waste titanium rutile in the UAS chemistry department. To pay for college, I worked as a miner, engineer, and builder. In 2008, in my role as an Energy and Housing Program Assistant at the Alaska Extension Service, I attended the Fairbanks Cost of Energy Task Force. By the task force's conclusion, there were only 2 options considered, natural gas or growing willows to burn. The task force voted to pursue natural gas or methane. The IGU, or Interior Gas Utility, is the result of that vote and the subsequent ballot initiative. I'm asking you today to reject our conclusion from 14 years ago and vote no on the fiscal note in HB 307 and to reduce the oil investment tax credit allocation. Methane-derived electricity costs 3 times more than electricity from large wind turbines. And if the oil industry is speaking the truth, more rare earth metals are needed to transition away from gas and put Putin out of business. But the fossil fuel business industry is not being honest about its greatest competitor, which is what wind energy is. In fact, rare earth metals are not necessary for any wind or solar technology. Rare earths are used for convenience and design, so I ask you to also remove the $750,000 for the DGGS metals mapping and marking projects with DNR. The Canadian mining industry is well capitalized and they don't need our money. All uses for rare earth metals such as doping have a substitute, most often iron. In Alaska, 90% of available land is reserved for mining. This is not just or sustainable. May Ukraine crush its invaders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garrison. We appreciate you calling today. Next up in Nome is Mary David. Please state your name, affiliation, and begin your 2-minute testimony. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify this afternoon. My name is Mary David, and I'm the Executive Vice President at Quirk in Nome, the regional nonprofit providing services here in the Bering Straits region. I'm calling in to highlight areas of the House CS and the operating and mental health budgets that we are in support of. Public safety is a priority in our region, and we support the proposed FY23 Department of Public Safety, Village Public Safety Officer Program budget items, like supporting full grant funding salary increases, a tribal liaison, and resources to bring on additional 10 VPSOs. We support the recommendations of the Finance Subcommittee and the Governor related to Medicaid, behavioral health grants, the Office of Children's Services, and ensuring adequate resourcing of the State Tribal Child Welfare Compact. Around education, we support the $50 million subcommittee increment to the K-12 public education base student allocation and the $2.5 million for pre-kindergarten grants. We support the governor's proposed full funding for community assistance and school bond debt reimbursement, REAA. And lastly, the news, weather, and any ER notices are often broadcasted over public radio. So we support subcommittee $1.5 million increment for public broadcasting for radio stations in communities under 20,000 people. In closing, I would just like to thank you all for your service and hard work to the state and wish you well during your deliberations of our operating budget. And Cleanna, thank you.
Mary, thank you so much. We appreciate you calling in. Next, we'll go to the Fairbanks LIO. Teresa Reed, if you could state your name, affiliation, and please begin your 2-minute testimony.
Thank you. I'm Teresa Reed. I have lived in Fairbanks since 1964. And I want to say for all of the other people like me who hardly ever get involved in government, what a job you have. All of the people who are testifying to you have things that are real and important. And thank you for trying to figure this out. I want to encourage you, please, to support the base student allotment increase, because I think if our education is not strong, is not the best we can produce for people, we can't keep the state good and strong and working. We won't have people like you to make the laws. We won't have people like all of the other ones that we've heard from who are offering services to people with special needs. We won't have them if we don't educate them. So that's the most important thing that you can do, is make sure we keep our schools really strong, and they can't be strong unless they're supported by money from the state to help them be that way. Thank you very much for your work.
Great, thank you very much. And I don't see any questions. So next at the Fairbanks LIO there, we've got Randy Griffin. If you can state your name and your affiliation.
Do I have to press this button? Or?
Oh, we can hear you just
My
fine.
name is Randy Griffin. I'm just representing myself. Just to comment on HB 281. Actually came down here with a few capital budget type of items that I would support, but I guess this is the operating budget, so you don't want to hear about that. Another testifier commented regarding the tax credits that were promised to the, I guess she was talking about the tax credits that were promised to the little exploration companies that did all the work trying to find oil with the thought that they're going to get these credits. And it sounded like that she was pleased that they are in the operating budget, and I fully support that because of the message that it sends to investors for this state. I guess I would just say regarding any cuts, I haven't looked at this budget much, I'm afraid, but I hope that we will always look at giving public assistance out to not to people who are not trying to find a job if there is a job available. I don't know to what extent that's being abused, but we shouldn't have people getting assistance without working. On another little side note, today I finally got around to sending my 2021 PFD check, my uncashed PFD check of $1,114 back to the state. I just now mailed it today back to the Department of Revenue with a letter explaining why. And the reason I procrastinated was because, heck, looked like we have a surplus now, and I thought, I wonder if I should keep that. But I'm under the impression that we have not really made a serious attempt to pay back the $12 billion that were drained out of the CBR. I think at least a token payment, maybe you have made a token payment to that. But I think since the Constitution requires that we do that we ought to do that. And also we want to be ready for the next oil price crash if such a thing happens. because it sure saved our bacon last time when the oil prices crashed in 2014. And I guess one of the thought, not part of the operating budget, but certainly would relate to the operating budget, I think people ought to give a little bit of thought to amending the Public Employment Relations Act, which was passed in 1972 by the Alaska legislature and ushered in the age of collective bargaining for state employees. I don't think we should do that. I think we should follow former Governor Scott Walker's lead in Wisconsin when he, in 2011, curtailed collective bargaining. That would certainly save a lot of money in the operating budget. And thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Griffin. We've got a question from Representative Levon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Randy, thank you for taking the time to call in, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. And with that, we'll now go back to the off-nets here. And we've got Dennis Boyer calling in from Wasilla. If you can state your name, your affiliation, proceed with your 2-minute testimony. Mr. Boyer, are you there?
I am. My name is Dennis Boyer. I'm a retired teacher. I started teaching in 1973 at Trapper Creek Elementary, and I retired in June of 2021. I've seen a lot of changes. We have a problem in Alaska in education. I would like to speak out and say we made a mistake as we've removed the teacher retirement because we can't recruit teachers at this point. It's very difficult. Back in the day when our recruiters would go to the lower 48, they would be swarmed by people wanting to work in Alaska. We had the best retirement system in the United States. Now at job fairs in the lower 48, people don't even come to the booth. They say Alaska has the worst wages and the worst retirement for teachers in the entire United States. It's really kind of embarrassing. I think we should look at going back to a defined retirement system like other states have. I think it's a mistake that Alaska doesn't allow teachers to contribute to, and when they're of the age, draw Social Security. We came up with the Windfall Elimination Profits Act, which is kind of a complicated way to say you're not going to get Social Security, and if you've already earned it, you're going to get a major deduction if you're a teacher. Now teachers work, they have no retirement, they don't have Social Security. When we took the retirement away in 2006, we took away. They didn't get Social Security to help replace it. There's a lot to look at and a lot to do, and I know you guys have heard this before. I just want to speak out for good education in Alaska, and it's going to require us to do something about our ability to recruit teachers. My 2 minutes is up, and I thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. And I don't see any questions. So next we'll go over to Timothy Ledna calling in from Fairbanks. If you can state your name, your affiliation.
Hello, my name is Timothy Ledna. I'm the Fairbanks Reentry Coalition Coordinator. I also am a mental health clinician for the Fairbanks Mobile Crisis Team on the weekends. I'm calling in to support both the behavioral health treatment and recovery grants, and I want to say in particular the crisis stabilization grants that I'm calling in to support. I, as a frontline worker, a mental health clinician for the mobile crisis team here in Fairbanks, I can say with certainty that the mobile crisis team is doing exactly what it is that we had hoped to do by establishing these mobile crisis teams, and that is that our crisis stabilization in the community on the streets is reducing the need for more expensive and time-consuming services. We have definitely alleviated law enforcement and the number of calls that they have to take in our community. We have also reduced the number and time spent by emergency medical services with folks in hospital emergency room visits. And then, of course, wearing my Reentry Coalition Coordinator hat, I'm also able to say firsthand, working as in the mobile crisis team, getting called out at 10 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, that we are also able to help divert people from jails and prisons and the court system by addressing mental health crisis and other related issues. Thank you for all the work that you do as lawmakers, and please continue to support these important budget initiatives. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I don't see any questions. So next we'll go over to Carrie Harris, calling in from Anchor Point. If you can state your name, your affiliation, proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Hi, I'm Carrie Harris from Anchor Point. I'm a big no on this budget. You need to pay the full statutory PFD, then write the budget. Public safety needs to be funded by $100 million more. Corrections needs to be funded by $100 million more. UAA needs to be cut in half. They can develop their land, and they need to be required to be self-funded within 5 years. Right now, Fish and Game is out chasing rabbits and taking DNA samples from rabbit poop. Our rabbit population is fine. Their budget needs to be cut in half. Students, we're losing students. We don't need to be given money if students aren't in school. So early education needs to be completely removed. The student allocation needs to be cut severely, and probably another 10 million taken out of the primary education. Early education needs to go. Health and social services needs to be cut, and the rest of your budget needs to be cut by a minimum of 25%. And since you're just wasting money, the Ukrainians, they were just recently handed guns for a first time. So let's get ahead on that and just put in an extra $500 million and hand everyone over 16 and AK-47. That way, you guys can feel good about wasting money. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, I don't see any questions or comments. So we'll next move over to Darlene Suppley, calling in from Fairbanks. If you can state your name and your affiliation.
Hi, my name is Darlene Suppley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Fairbanks Senior Center, and I am calling in support of the additional funding for senior grants throughout the state. We have a 51% increase in seniors in the state of Alaska, fastest growing senior population of all the states, giving senior providers additional funding will allow us to be the front line for senior care. We have a 240% increase in seniors 85 and older in the interior, and that reflects out through the rest of the state, allowing grant providers to increase our services, provide safety nets for the most vulnerable population of the state while keeping senior income in the state. Currently, seniors bring in 53 cents per dollar. If we do not provide a network of senior care services, it will force seniors to either live in poverty or without, or move to the lower 48 to receive services. Independent living amongst our pioneers is probably the biggest expression of self-care that we hear. And senior providers through grant funds allow us to make sure that we are safeguarding one of the most vulnerable populations. Thank you for your time. Appreciate all that you do.
Great, thank you very much. And we've got a question, Representative Levon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Darlene, thank you for all you do for our community and for your patience in calling in today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next we'll move over to Nicole Zigastowski, and calling from Anchorage. If you can state your name and your affiliation.
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Zigachowski, and I live in Anchorage, and I am testifying on my own behalf. I am proud to be a UAA alumna, and I wish for others to have a similar educational experience and opportunities. I would like to express my support for the subcommittee recommendations for the University of Alaska budget. The UA system is a cornerstone of economic and workforce development and plays a major role in the lives of many Alaskans. The university system is a great investment in Alaskans and the economy. After 3 years of extreme sacrifice, it is important to look at how we can invest in our state's future, and the subcommittee's recommendation is a good start. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you for calling in. I don't see any questions. And so next we'll go to Benjamin Johnson, calling in from Dallas. If you can state your name, your affiliation, and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
And Co-Chairs Foster and Merrick and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to comment. I'm Benjamin Johnson, President and CEO of Blue Crest Energy, a Cook Inlet developer of the Cosmopolitan unit. And today I want to thank you for this bill that includes the remaining tax credit funds in FY22 supplemental and the statutory minimum in the FY23 budget. Blue Crest is a small company entirely focused on developing our Alaska Cook Inlet assets. We have just started developing the large proved oil field that has now been paused due to lack of investment for drilling. And our huge proved gas field now sits completely undeveloped. All of this oil and gas would be used by Alaska residents, none of it exported. And future state royalties alone would likely be over $500 million. Now, our initial investment funding was based on the laws that were in effect when we started out under the tax credit program. But as we got started and had invested over $300 million, with the state owing us about $100 million in tax credits at the time, we learned that not only was the law changing to stop earning tax credits resulting from our investments, but the state stopped paying the credits already earned. So our investors continued as they could, but we've not been able to raise new investment now for several years. We have literally talked with every major investment bank and large private equity group in the world. And what we hear is that they have concerns about investing in Alaska, and the unpaid tax credits have played a big part in that. If we can resume honoring the statutory tax credit payments, and we're a couple of years behind right now, and get that resolved, I think Alaska can have a tremendous future ahead. Thank you for your consideration, including these payments in the budget.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Got a question from Representative Laban.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, for calling in all the way from Dallas, and thank you for your willingness and interest to invest in Alaska. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we'll move over to Marge Stone King, calling in from Anchorage. If you can state your name and your affiliation.
Hi, this is Marge Stone King, Advocacy Director with the AARP Alaska. On behalf of our 77,000 members and older Alaskans, I'm testifying in support of the Hess Finance Subcommittee's recommendations for increased senior grants and funding and public health positions focused on Alzheimer's and other dementias. Thank you to the Finance Committee members for adopting the Budget CS, including these AARP priority areas. Additionally, AARP supports the increment to general relief funding you've heard much about, and to restore the Division of Public Assistance staff positions. Regarding the senior community grants increment of $912,200, these go to senior centers and other nonprofits statewide, providing Meals on Wheels and other critical services. With the funds having remained flat, or essentially flat, over the last 10 years, and the increased senior population, 50% increase during that time period, providers have had to cut back on services. Sometimes that means cutting back a daily meal through Meals on Wheels or group meals at senior centers to every other day. And some seniors rely on those meals as their only meal of the day. Other senior centers have had to cut out transportation services entirely, and that leaves seniors without options for grocery shopping, medical appointments, and senior center activities. Regarding the $120,000 to the Division of Public Health, this would fund a staff position to begin to address Alzheimer's and related dementia at the population-wide level, to raise public awareness of modifiable risk factors and train healthcare providers for earlier diagnosis, and to access federal BOLD Act funds through grant writing. AARP does support the Hess Finance Subcommittee recommended restoration of 20 positions to Department of Public Assistance field staff. Without these positions, and despite the planned online efficiencies, the cuts to the frontline staff positions last year has meant that Alaskans are continuing to experience challenges accessing services. Thank you for this time.
Great, thank you, Ms. Stone King. I don't see any questions, so next we'll move over to Eric Gurley, calling in from Anchorage. If you can state your name, your affiliation, proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Good afternoon, Representative Co-Chair and members of the House Finance Committee. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Eric Gurley, an Alaskan since 1975. I live in Anchorage. I'm representing Alaska's 4 Centers for Independent Living, which serves Alaskans statewide that experience disabilities, seniors, and veterans. I'm here to speak in support of HB 281, specifically the Senior Disabilities Community-Based Grants increment of $1.4 million, consisting of $586,000 for Centers for Independent Living and $912,200 for SDS community-based grant recipients. My ask, please continue your support of this measure. I am the Executive Director of Access Alaska, Inc. Last year, Access Alaska served 619 consumers in the communities and outlying areas of Anchorage, Fairbanks, the Mat-Su, Kenai Peninsula, Bethel, and Southwest regions. Our services include independent living skills development, advocacy, peer support, information and referral, and nursing home transitions back to the consumer's home and community. Again, independent living centers helped Alaskans and their families in their efforts to improve their independence and to remain in their own homes and communities. Last year, Centers for Independent Living collectively delivered over 5,669 services and worked with 2,450 consumers. We also assisted 111 Alaskans transition from assisted living homes or nursing homes to a home and community-based setting, thus saving Alaska $15,057,439 in public funds. To the committee, you have heard multiple testimonies from Arctic Access, SAIL, ILC, and Access Alaska, each describing the important work of the CILs, particularly keeping Alaskans in their homes and out of nursing home level of care. I and many Alaskans are thankful for HB 281. Thank you for the time, detail, and care you have taken to assure this increment is in place. One more time, thank you.
Great.
Please keep supporting the proposed SDS community-based grant increment of $1.4 million.
Thank you, Mr. Gurley. I see no questions, so we'll move over to S.K. Son, calling in from Anchorage. If you can state your name and your affiliation and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Oh, hello. My name is S.K. Son, owner and administrator at Anchor House in Anchorage. Oh, thank you so much for giving me opportunity for public testimony for support of a proposed increase in GR daily rate. I just want to share that, all the ALH, which is assisted living home, who are providing care for mentally health, dealing with covers a very wide range of symptoms. And we're dealing with extreme and constant depression and severe highs and low moods, and exhibit alcohol abuse and drug abuse, and attempt to, self-harm or harm others. And there's a lot of suicidal ideation, erratic behaviors, and auditory and visual hallucination. And we are spending, most of the time with a client like this 24/7. But since the bill 281 come up, and I very and greatly appreciate all your hard work, and I'd like to share that and thank you. And you guys support that this bill, and we can continue to this behavioral health as a providers, and desire to be a great part of the solution. But we need funds in order to accomplish what is necessary and certainly desirable for the well-being of all of these most vulnerable individuals. So thank you so much for your support, and I really, really appreciate your passing the House Bill 281. Thank you.
Great, and thank you. I don't see any questions, so next we'll go to Carl Weissner, calling in from Kotzebue. If you can put yourself on the record as well as your affiliation.
Hi there. Yes, thanks, co-chairs. Carl Weissner, Northwest Arctic Borough Public Services Director. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to testify. Thank you. Big thank you, as big as I can possibly convey, for the committee adding remaining funding for school bond debt reimbursement for this year and for fully funding it for next year. That opens up so many options, so many important options that we can do for the people of the Northwest Arctic, an area the size of Indiana, 10 villages spread out. We would like to renovate our shelter cabins along those winter trails. We'd like to build small warm storage units that store snow machines for volunteer search and rescue personnel. And your fully funding school bond debt reimbursement really helps us get those things done, those important things done. Also, thank you very much for the VPSO intent language. Our goal is to get a VPSO in every one of our 10 villages. We are building residential units in each of those villages and warm storage units for their equipment so that VPSOs are comfortable and they're and have a career. So thank you very much, and we really appreciate your work.
Great, thank you. I don't see any questions, so I'll move over to Susie Pearson calling in from Anchorage. If you can state your name and your affiliation.
Good afternoon to the chairs and members of the committee. My name is Susie Pearson, and I'm the Executive Director of Abused Women's Aid in Crisis, or AWAKE, in Anchorage. AWAKE is a 67-bed emergency shelter for victims of domestic violence. It is the only emergency shelter for domestic violence victims in Anchorage. A critical part of our funding comes from CDVSA. The proposed budget was fully funded by the Department of Public Safety Subcommittee. We are deeply appreciative of the commitment that they made to protect domestic violence victims. I'm now asking you to continue the full support of CDVSA funding. These funds are critical to maintaining a secure network of shelters and services throughout the state. CDVSA funds a variety of critical programs at AWAKE, most importantly the emergency shelter and 24-hour crisis line. Additionally, AWAKE receives CDVSA funding for our legal advocacy, non-residential services, and prevention efforts. Because of the funding we have received, we've been able to provide emergency shelter to 405 women, men, and children in the last year. One of the participants experienced physical, sexual, and financial abuse from her partner and had to flee to protect her and her children. She had tried to leave him several times. Through the tireless efforts of her case manager and incredible fortitude on the participant's part, she was connected to resources to build financial stability and receive counseling. With the help of programs such as AHFC's Empowering Choices Housing Program voucher, she was able to successfully find a safe housing for her and her children. CDVSA primarily funds staffing for AWAKE staff. However, it also provides flexibility to help pay for utilities and insurance to ensure our shelters open 24/7. We are grateful for the continued funding for AWAKE and all shelters and service providers that support victims of domestic violence throughout the state. Your ongoing support to fund CDVSA is deeply appreciated. Thank you for your support of victims of domestic violence and sexual assault and all your hard work in our communities. Thank you.
Great, and thank you, Ms. Pearson. I don't see any questions, so we'll move to our last testifier, and that is Kayleen Lamb, calling in from Fairbanks. If you can state your name and your affiliation. Ms. Lamb, are you there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Okay. If you'd like to, if you could state your name and your affiliation.
Okay. Yeah, I'm for House Bill 281 and 282 because I have a disability and I work at the grocery store, and I got a radar already, and I live in my own house. I don't want to live in. We don't want to go backwards in time. We want to stay forward in time. And I have an OPA, and it pays my bills and everything. And please keep it in, and the independent living and the waiver and the grant, the behavior grant program. And that would help a lot of people getting out of the independent in a good group home and get into a better house, a housing place. And that would save a lot of money. Appreciate it. Oh, next time I'm living with you.
Great. And we appreciate your...
That was just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lamb. We appreciate your testimony. We've got a question or comment from Representative Laban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Kayleen, for calling in. You've ended this public testimony on a very high note, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Agreed.
Have a nice one.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't think we've got anyone else. Let me just check and double check over here. Do we have anybody else? Okay, there's nobody in the room and nobody online who would like to testify. So with that, we will close public testimony for today. I'd like to remind anyone who's watching that if you'd like to submit written public testimony, you can do so by submitting that to house.finance@akleg.gov. Again, that's house.finance@akleg.gov. And just to clarify, we can receive testimony, or I should say your written comments at any time. Those can be submitted to the Finance Committee for our viewing. But in terms of just being submitted for the official record and being included with regard to the operating budget, we'll be taking that through tomorrow at 3 p.m. But again, public testimony or written testimony is always welcome. So with that, our next meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, and that's Saturday at 11 a.m. And if folks could sign up by 1:30 just to get into the line. And at that time, we'll be taking up public testimony on, again, the both budgets for the operating budget 281 as well as the mental health budget, which is HB 282. And then we'll wrap it up. And so with that, we'll hear from all communities from around the state, so that's statewide. And if there's nothing else to come for the committee, we'll be adjourned for the day at 4:08 p.m. Thank you.
Wow, another day jam-packed full of nearly nothing but the special interest calling in, saying thank you so much for giving us $50 million more for K through 12 and early education, even though the current SBA law says they should be seeing a $130 million budget cut due to the population dropping by 10% that are going to school. And we're just going to pop this next little picture up here just so that you guys all can see that tomorrow is the last day to testify. And I will slide the little logo up into the corner so you can see it down there. Tomorrow, starting at 11 a.m. until 2 p.m., they are taking testimony one more time for this. And they want to hear from everybody that is collecting the money from government and from the local and state budgets. And they don't want to hear from us average people. There was maybe 3 people that testified today that I would consider as the average Joe that spoke their mind and pointed out some very relevant facts that they choose to not listen to. And some of those things is that they haven't seen this kind of tax revenue being collected since pre-2014. And I'll emphasize the tax revenue that they have received this year has not been this high since prior to 2014, when they started to go down the spiraling path of spending their CBR to cover the shortfalls in the budget. And the tax revenue that they received this year, let's pretend for a moment they were to actually follow the laws that are there and for the budget. The tax revenue that they have received is enough to cover the flat funding of last year's budget. And I'll emphasize that the budget that they had for last year, flat funded for inflation, they have received more tax revenue than what is needed to be able to pay for that budget. In fact, by almost a couple of $1 billion at this point, and there's still 4 more months to go into the fiscal year before they close out for what they get to spend. So they have all this big, huge surplus that's sitting there. So they could pay for the entire budget and put a couple $1 billion away into the CBR account, which, by the way, if they could get that back up to, I believe it's at the $12 billion mark, the sweep wouldn't happen anymore. The other big debate over power cost equalization or the whammy programs or all those other things that are taken when they do the sweep, we got to emphasize the point that they could stop that from happening just by building their CBR account back up. So here's what they are doing, and we're going to emphasize some really corrupt thinking that's going on here. They're applying the SB26 POMV Law as the only facilitator for writing a budget. And what they have done is that they took their calculations based on the 5% draw, and this is what they built their budget on. And they have increased, because the dollar amount that they get with that 5% draw is larger than what they were getting last year. I mean, last year was $3.1 billion. This year, I believe it would be $4.1 billion. I mean, a big $1 billion jump. I mean, just to give you an idea. And they're taking all of that extra money and they're spending it on the state and capital budget, is where they're going to end up distributing all of that money out to. And then they're going to use the tax money that they get, what they should be spending on the budget, and that tax money is what they're going to give us their, if I saw the numbers correctly, it's another $1,100 PFD. And then they're going to take that tax money that they got and they're going to cut us a stimulus check for $1,300. So they're using taxes to pay us our PFD and to give us a stimulus check. Both combined is barely just a hair over half of what they statutorily owe us under the original 4-decade-old statutory PFD formula. We should be seeing somewhere around a $4,000 PFD this year, not no $2,400 with their mock $1,100 PFD and their $1,300 stimulus that they're now proposing. So let's pretend for just 1 second now that they actually follow the law. So the SB26 is ignored, because that is the law that is basically the corrupt law. Shouldn't even be on the books, shouldn't be there at all. So we'll pretend it doesn't exist and they actually follow the law. They received enough tax revenue to completely fund the entire budget this year and have a surplus of about $2 billion that they could put away into the CBR account and start building that back up to the $12 billion mark, so that they don't have to use to keep doing the sweep every year, the stuff that always gets the whiners and criers, because now whammy's at stake, power cost equalization's at stake, all these other things are at stake, that sweep goes and gathers back in, because they got to show that they got to return all that money back into the CBR every year, because they got to get back to that $12 billion mark that they're supposed to be at. And until it has that in its actual savings, that sweep is going to happen every single year, because it's got to be added in on top of the revenue that they bring in, the tax revenue. So the tax revenue that they got, like I said, is enough to cover this entire state and capital budget, especially if they flat fund it from last year's total, not the bloated pork-filled budget that they got right now. You know, $50 million more for early education, they said. And that $50 million is only going to happen if they don't pass the new SBA law that they're writing, the student-based allocation. The student-based allocation current law says that they should be cutting the budget by at least 10%, because they've had a 10% reduction in the population of school-age children going to school in our state. That would constitute roughly around $133 million budget cut. I like to say $130 million should be cut from the budget, if they were to follow the current law. But they don't like following laws. We've seen that. So they're now crafting a new SBA law. And Kelly Merrick, based on one of the testifiers there, brought it up that that $50 million is only going to happen if their new SBA law doesn't pass. So instead of following the current law, which would have said they got a 10% reduction, $130 million off of our state budget, they're proposing to change the SBA law, student base allocation, so that it increases what they get far and beyond what they currently have right now. As she stated, that $50 million increase that they have showing in the budget right now only applies if their new SBA law does not pass. So clearly, you know, that our legislators down there are not after following the laws. If they don't match their agenda or what they want to do, they just rewrite new ones. And that's what they've been doing with our permanent fund dividend when they passed SB26, the POMV law. They just wrote a new one, left the old one on the books, and says we're going to ignore the other law, even though it's still a law, and we're going to use this law instead. And we don't care that we're breaking the law by using this new law that we made. We are legislators. We're allowed to break the law. So again, pretending that they followed the law. Their budget is fully funded. They have a couple $2 billion to put into the CBR. Now they can follow the 4-decade-old statutory PFD law and pay us our statutory PFD of around $4,000 this year. And they have also received enough earned income that has come in through the door that literally for our ERA and the corpus itself has generated enough new income this year that paying us our statutory PFD is just a drop in the bucket compared to the earnings that has made. In fact, they could pay back every Alaskan our statutory PFD and every penny that they have stolen over the last 6 years, all $14,000 of that, and our $4,000 statutory PFD this year combined, and give it to the 630,000 or so eligible Alaskans for the permanent fund dividend who's been eligible over all these years also to get the full amount. And that money could be distributed to it, and you know what? Not a single penny would ever dip into anything other than what they have put brand new earnings in, the income that was made, the profits that was made in just this past year. And to remind you, there's still 4 more months to go before they close out the fiscal year for the PFD. 4 more months to go. They keep saying $81.5 billion because that's what shows on the website. But if you actually go into the numbers of where the actual dollar value is at, it's closer to $82.5 billion. And thanks to Joe Brandon, it's not going to increase at the record levels that it was at, but it's still increasing dramatically on a monthly basis. It's still giving a good net generation of about $1 billion a month. So it's a good possibility that could be up to $86 billion before the fiscal year is up. And again, they could pay back everything they've stolen from us, our statutory PFD this year, and still have a record-breaking profit far and beyond what they ever exceeded or ever thought of being at. In fact, the Permanent Fund Corporation, at the dollar amount that it's at right now, they, in their earlier models, never predicted this to happen for at least another 10 to 20 more years before they would have been at the $80 billion level sitting there in the permanent fund account. So, you know, they're banking on us being too stupid to use logic when we are discussing things. And unfortunately, that is our Alaska legislature for you. I see the stimulus check of $1,300 that they're distributing to all of Alaskans as being nothing more than a bribe to buy our votes. They just want to buy our votes, and they want those votes to be going to them saying, oh, look, we actually care about Alaskans. But the bottom line is, if they were to pay the statutory PFD, that would be $1,600 more than what they want to give us in combining the statutory, the cut down version of their PFD and the stimulus check combined is $1,600 less than what our statutory PFD is supposed to be this year. And they want to use the tax revenue, those record-breaking gains that they made in taxes this past year, thanks to oil prices going through the roof. Like I said, they got a surplus sitting there in tax revenue. They can cover the entire budget, still have a couple $1 billion still sitting there to put away. But they want to snowball job everybody. They want us to think they don't have the money, that they can't do that they can't follow the laws that we have. They got to keep continuing to follow the laws that corrupted the original laws, the ones that got us in trouble in the first place. These new laws of theirs is what got us in trouble. They could have followed the statutory law, and we would never be in the situation that we're in right now. Our economy here in Alaska would not be tanking as bad as it is right now if they would just actually follow the law. But if you've noticed, and I did, especially since I sat through all those committee meetings, listening to the Department of Revenue of Alaska discussing how much revenue has come into the state and how much of a surplus they have sitting there, and listening to the PFD Corporation say how much is sitting there and how they've made their record-breaking profits, far exceeding any of their 10-year goal plans that they had designed, far exceeding them. They never expected to be this high up this quickly in this short of a time. They 10 years from now didn't even predict it being at $80 billion sitting there in the corpus of an ERA of our account. So these legislators are just snowballing us, saying they don't have it. And now here we're at record-breaker oil prices. That was back when they were spending like drunken sailors way back when. Remember when our state and capital budgets were 13, 14, 20 billion dollars as they were expanding things throughout the state with that big oil boom, building all of those roads to nowhere, bridges to nowhere that never got finished. All those we gotta have it projects that never got completed, and when they ran out of money because of the recession and all of that, and 2014. Then that's when they started dipping into that big, huge surplus that they had built up inside of their CBR account. At one time, it was at $29 billion. They don't want to admit that. And then Parnell, in his parting gift as he left office, he gave a $4 billion kick into the retirement accounts of our government workers, our state employees, to bring that $20 billion deficit that they had going on there back into a closer reality. That was his parting gift, and that's what pretty much that and a couple of other things that they had done. And when I say $29 billion sitting in the CBR, I'm including their SBR account too, their savings account. I'm including those both into that $29 billion totals, because between the savings and the CBR, they had $29 billion sitting there. Now they're sitting with only about $2 billion of it left. But they're back to being drunken sailors again. They've got this big surplus of tax revenue sitting there, and they don't want to follow the laws that we have. They don't want to continue to keep restraining that budget. They're spending that money like drunken sailors, and claiming that they can't pay us a PFD, a statutory PFD, or even a 50-50 PFD because there's no money there. They're lying by what they are doing. Again, they got enough tax revenue this year to pay for the entire state and capital budget and have a surplus of a couple billion to put away without ever once touching the earnings reserve account with their very corrupt POMV law. So they don't even need to do that this year. Just completely ignore it. Now follow the statutory PFD law, transfer the permanent fund dividend, the statutory amount, over into the general budget and pay us. It's that simple. I mean, there's no tax revenue involved at all. It's being done as the law was originally written, and end of discussion. But again, this is our corrupt legislators out there that want us to believe that none of this can be done because following the laws is not what legislators do. Legislators make the laws, and if they don't match what their agenda is, they just change them at whim and ignore the laws that exist to do whatever they want, keeping those special interests very well funded. Like a $50 million increase if their corrupt reallocation new SBA law, student base allocation law, doesn't pass through. Here's $50 million more for you this year to help you guys out. But if we can, instead of following the law and giving you guys a 10% reduction, this is our alternative. We're going to give you a bonus if the new law they're writing doesn't go into effect, because the new law changes the total dollar amount of the base allocation. So instead of that 10% reduction under the current law they should be seeing, they're going to be seeing about a 5%, 10% increase in their budget based on the new SBA law that they're trying to get passed right now. So just like SB26, the POMV Law, they're trying to subvert our current laws to keep the special interests well funded and cater to them at the expense and backbreaking of Alaskans. Before this pandemic started, we had less than 1/3 of Alaska living off of one form of welfare or another. Now they're reporting nearly 40% of Alaska is living off of one form of welfare or another, and that increase is being paid using our permanent fund dividends. Instead of doing the smart thing and lifting Alaskans back out of poverty again by following the statutory PFD laws, returning what they've stolen over the last 6 years, which they have a huge surplus sitting there that they can do this easily and still not damage or cause any long-term or permanent harm to the permanent fund dividend like they're always crying and whining will happen, because that's another lie. But if you say a lie enough times, people begin to believe it and begin to repeat it and parrot it, and no matter how much evidence you provide to counter it, their truth-telling is the only truth, instead of here's the actual numbers, here's it is in black and white, here it is recorded with the Department of Revenue, here it is with the Permanent Fund Corporation, here's the actual dollar amounts that are out there, and here's what you could do. Here's where you could actually do your budget cuts, like SBA, 10% cut this year. And don't even get me into healthcare, nearly triple the costs anywhere else in the nation. I mean, a simple welfare doctor's check, go in, do your annual visit, is $300. $300 just to do a welfare call, basically here I'm going to check your vital stats, your heart, your blood pressure. And then they charge you another $90 on top of that for lab results, for a blood test, just to make sure that everything is going right, that you don't got diabetes and all this other good stuff. So by the time you get out of there, here's $400. And I spent less than 20, and I'm giving my own personal experience here, I spent less than 20 minutes inside of the actual hospital I was at, or the medical care facility. It was an out-care patient type place. And I went there, and for less than 20 minutes of seeing the doctor, getting in the door and getting back out the door, I got charged $400 for the combined visit, for something that if I was to go down into the lower 48, my doctor's visit would have been about $100, and my lab results would have been closer to 50, maybe 30, somewhere in that area. So half of what it cost me here in the state of Alaska, and I could have gone down to the lower 48 and done it. If I could have found a ticket cheap enough and a hotel room cheap enough, and I could charge that back to the state for doing that, I would do it. But I'm not one of those lucky that are living off of welfare in our state. I'm not one of those 40% of Alaskans that are struggling out there. I unfortunately make just barely over what they classify as the poverty limit. And because of that, I am not qualified for any of those programs. So I got to pay for all this stuff out of my own pocket, and I don't make enough to afford to be able to get health care. I can't afford to go and get one of their Obamacare plans for businesses because I am self-employed. It was costing me more when it first started, before Obamacare came into play. My medical for eye, dental, health, all of them combined was less than $100 a month for what I paid out of my premium. And within 2 visits, I had my portion paid off, and the insurance completely paid for the rest of it. Obamacare came into play. They opened up the business market to these new healthcare plans. The cost of healthcare started skyrocketing. All the insurance companies out there started jacking their rates out there, and I went from less than $200 a month for all the different coverages, eye, health, so on and so forth, and found myself that now it's over $900 a month for me and my child. $900 a month, like I'm supposed to be able to afford that and still keep the roof over my head, food on the table, and gas in the gas tank. Shake my head. So if you didn't call in and testify today for the state state budget and the mental health budget, please call in and testify tomorrow. Tomorrow is the very last day that they're taking testimonies. If you're unable to call in, please send the house.finance@akleg.gov website. It's right there on the screen right now. Email them your testimony. Tell them to stop the theft, follow the laws, spend their tax money like they're supposed to, completely ignore their POMV law and follow the statutory PFD law instead this year. Forget about that stupid stimulus check. We don't want a stimulus check. We want our statutory PFD, following the law, transferring it from the earnings reserve account and distributing it out to all Alaskans like the law says you're supposed to. Again, they've got more tax revenue than they know what to do with this year. They can completely pay for the entire budget, put a couple $1 billion away into their CBR account, and then transfer over, following the statutory PFD law, from the earnings reserve, the money that belongs to us. And there's no need of their 5% POMV draw. They don't need to be following that corrupt law this year. Again, they have more tax revenue than they have budget. There's no need to be stealing from the earnings reserve account. There is no shortfall this year. Zero. None for them covering the state and capital budget, and they know it. And they are denying it openly, trying to keep that from getting out to all of us here in the public. So please educate your neighbors, educate your friends, educate your family, and get them to call in or at least email. This is just as much as just as important as calling in every time they have some bill that directly affects our permanent fund dividend. We need to get accountability. They need to be living within their means of their budget and stop breaking the law. Go to my website, politidic.com, click that support button. All proceeds go right back into being able to make sure that we can keep on expanding. My next goal is to be on Rebel, Rumble, excuse me. Get myself on Rumble, and because I am a rebel. And I want to be able to start live streaming on rumble.com on a daily basis, or at least every time I'm able to go live. And just for their basic package costs $25 a month, and it's limited to 50 viewers per episode. That's just at the $25 mark. To get into unlimited, it gets up to around $400 or $500 a month that you have to shell out to be able to stream unlimited and have unlimited viewers at the same time. But I'm being censored on Facebook here. Facebook is making sure that my posts are not reaching anybody. I mean, 4,000 followers, 4,600 and some followers follow Politidic, and this particular video has only reached around 130 people and been shared 5 times. 130 people it's reached. That's 130 out of 4,600 that follow Politidic that received notification or at least saw that this video was going on here right now. Please, again, like, share this video. It's greatly appreciated. We've got to get past those censors out there. By liking it, it sends the algorithms and tells them that this is something important and people like it. By sharing it, it makes sure more people that can see it, more people that have the opportunity to like it, the more it keeps making those algorithms keep pushing these kind of videos out there so people continue to get educated. As I always suggest to most people out there, is go to the very end of the videos if you want the cut version of what happened that day, because that's what I'm doing right now. Or watch the entire thing so it's uncut and unfiltered and you can hear what is going on without the political spin of what they'll say about today's testimonies. I'm very proud of the very few, the less than one handful of people that called in that was against the budget that they have right now. And I'm very proud of all you guys for stepping up, especially if this was out of your comfort zone. And I remember how I was in the very beginning. It was out of my comfort zone. And to acknowledge all of the other folks that had called in, and they showed what true activism is like. They have everybody of their organization call in one after another, after another, after another, after another, continuing to beat upon the same subjects. Give us money, give us money, give us more money. Keep on giving us money. And the opposition to all of that special interest testimony that has been given yesterday and today, it's just not there. All I'm hearing for opposition against what is going on about their budget and how corrupt it really is is very few, small handful. I'm really hoping those people are emailing in, because these testimonies, those emails, that's what they're judging, the basing what Alaskans want to have. And if all they hear from is the special interest that businesses depend upon that state and capital and the local government spending for their jobs, they're the ones that are going to make sure they call in every single time. And then the rest of us who pay for it in the end through our taxes, our property taxes, everything else, like I said, state and local, all of our property taxes and everything else, all those taxes that we pay, the road tax that we pay for our studs on our tires, so on and so forth, the gas tax, etc. Those taxes are what they're advocating for. I mean, I hope you enjoy your $4.30 a gallon gas prices right now that we have. I mean, this is a direct impact of socialist spending. Capitalism at its worst. I mean, when you take the supply and you completely get rid of it, the demand's still there, and then you wonder why the prices are going up, because you can't get more of it, so they're going to jack up what they do have so that they can get paid more for that, because when it comes time for them to go rebuild or resupply this stuff or remake this stuff, it's now costing them more, because the supply chain has been so disrupted, the manufacturing side of things have been so disrupted, that there is no hope in hell that we're going to see this recession that's starting, this hyperinflation that is through the roof, 4-decade record-breaking high for inflation. And 50 cents in gas prices jumping in just 3 days. That should really wake you up to what to expect to come. If you run your house and heating oil is how you heat your home, put that order in today. Scramble, beg, borrow from people money-wise. The best advice I can give you at this point, just from what I'm seeing with the handwriting on the wall, especially if Russia doesn't, if what Russia is doing doesn't stop, I mean, they're going to take over Ukraine. I don't see that not happening. Ukraine is putting up one hell of a fight. We're seeing a true, really patriotic country there fighting for their freedoms, unlike Afghanistan, who rolled over in the same amount of time that Ukraine has not given up basically 1 inch, versus Afghanistan, where Americans lost, we lost 13 of our best there, brought home with flags over them. And unlike Joe Brandon, who won't show respect for our military, that's always got to throw out his son who served, who it's really unfortunate that it happened, that he died of cancer, but he was not a war hero. He didn't die a war hero. He didn't die as a war hero, and keep putting him out there and then making statements about those coming home underneath the flag, and then toting his son as a shining example who died, but doesn't tell you how he dies. I mean, it's just one of those lies they keep pushing. We got to wake up. We got to realize. We got to educate people. Again, thank you all for being here today. Like, share, go to the website politidic.com, hit that support button. All proceeds is going right back to continuing to keep expanding. We are on using Restream so that we can be on Politidic Unfiltered. Both of these are on Facebook. You can also find us on YouTube at Politidic and Twitter at Politidic. Anytime we go live, we are on all of these channels at the same time. And with your support, by going to politidic.com and clicking that support button, we will be on Rumble soon enough. We want to get on Rumble, even if it's only the $25 a month plan. But without supporters like you, I personally can't afford to do that. I already emphasized earlier, I'm right at that poverty level. I'm comfortable, but I'm not rich. I don't make a big fortune. I can't go out and eat every day. And it just boils down to, I watch my pennies. I group all of my things together into one trip, so that way I'm not making multiple of them. And for the first time in 20 years, I even had to raise the rates that I charge my customers. I did that last month. I raised my rates up to cover the increasing cost of hyperinflation, the new cost of buying the materials I use within my company. And I had to find a way to be able to cover especially that gas prices cost. And if it goes up to $8, like Bryce Edgman and their stimulus check they want to give us, his claims of it going up to $8 an hour, my own claims is going to be $8 a gallon, not an hour, $8 a gallon. By this time next year, I'm going to have to raise my rates even more just to be able to cover that exorbitant gas price, not to mention what my fuel costs are going to be for heating my home. I mean, I use a Tayo stove, so I've got heating oil to run my house. And I put $1,000 in this last year, and that gave me almost 400 gallons. Well, we're looking at $4 a gallon right now for heating oil. I'm not going to be able to buy that same amount of I will not get that 400 gallons of fuel oil that I got last year at the same time. This year I'm only going to be able to get half of that with the same amount of money. It's really frightening at what it's going to cost us all. And Democrats in Brandon and all of them have all declared that they are outright not going to increase energy production out there. They're not going to do anything to offset it. Their solution is more green energy, more electric vehicles, more windmills, more solar power. This is how they're going to offset it all. It does nothing for our economy but drives our prices up higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And they openly admitted, Joe Brandon even ran on it, they would love to see gas prices reach $8 a gallon, and they're getting their wildest, wettest dreams being handed to them on a silver platter by Joe Brandon's policies of shutting down our energy independence 4 days into taking office. And now with Russia invading Ukraine, disrupting all of the distribution of energy throughout the European countries, he controls them. He's got them by the balls. I mean, 70% of a lot of those places' energy needs all comes from Russia, and without Russia, they don't get it. I mean, even America's buying 600 million barrels a day from him. We're financing his war on Ukraine right now. I mean, we're keeping his war coffers well full. And the only solution that Pisaki and Brandon have offered us all is just tighten your belts and don't travel as much so that you're not using as much. We're going to release a little bit of our reserves, but like I pointed out earlier, 50-cent jump in gas at the pump in just the last 3 days. And that we're not going to do anything to help drive those prices back down by expanding our energy and production and what we get out there. We're just going to leave things as status quo because the Green New Deal is the future, and we're not going to jeopardize that by expanding our energy independence, which, in all honesty, if the European countries are to outlive or to have any hope of holding off those people in Ukraine, have any hope of holding off Russia and what they are doing right now, energy independence is the only way that's going to happen. And we've got a president and a Democrat Party that is doing everything in their power to do the exact opposite. If you want anyone to blame for what is going on in Ukraine right now with Russia, it is our weak administration, it is the Brandon administration, and it is the Democrat Party that is in support of it in both the House and the Senate that has made this happen with their policies and everything they've done over the past year. I'll have a great day. I'll shut myself up here right now, and thanks for tuning in. Like,